Hermione Granger woke with a jolt, her breath ragged, her mind foggy with the lingering haze of dreams. Her hands clutched at the sheets beneath her, heart hammering against her ribs as she tried to make sense of where she was. The familiar, dusty smell of books was gone, replaced by the faint scent of lavender. She blinked rapidly, forcing her vision to adjust, and realized she was lying in her own bed in her parents' house. Not the Gryffindor girls' dormitory. Not Hogwarts. The morning light streamed through the curtains, golden and ordinary. Her walls were bare of moving portraits or wizarding posters. They looked exactly as they had when she was a child before she had ever received that fateful letter. She sat up abruptly, chest tightening with confusion. On the bedside table sat a stack of books, but they were textbooks from her local school, nothing magical. There was no wand lying across the desk. No trunk at the foot of her bed. Her pulse quickened. The dream she had woken from had been so vivid, so real. 7 years at Hogwarts. The Sorting Hat, which had whispered choices into her ear. Meeting Harry, saving him from trolls and cursed objects, standing at his side in battles against impossible odds. Ron's laughter, Harry's determined gaze, Dumbledore's wisdom, Snape's cutting remarks. It had felt like an entire lifetime, full of triumph and heartbreak. Yet here she was, back in her childhood bedroom, with no proof any of it had happened. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and pressed her feet to the carpet, her body trembling as though it had just endured some great trial. She rushed to the mirror, staring at her own reflection. She looked younger. Not quite the 17-year-old who had fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, but the girl she had been at 14 or 15. Her hair was as wild as ever, her eyes wide with disbelief. Hermione sank to the floor, her hands pressed to her head. Had it all been a dream? 7 years of magic, of friends, of dangers survived. Nothing more than her imagination? The thought sent a wave of nausea through her. She remembered Harry's face so clearly, the boy who had lived and fought so hard to make the world better. She remembered the way Ron had argued with her, the way he had comforted her in darker times. She remembered spells, enchantments, places she swore she could still see if she closed her eyes. She stood again, moving with frantic energy, searching her room for something, anything, that would connect her to that other life. She pulled open drawers, tore through her wardrobe, dug into her desk. But there was nothing. No wand. No parchment. No magical photographs. Just the ordinary objects of a teenage girl's life. Her parents' voices drifted faintly from downstairs, calling her for breakfast. She froze, heart pounding. The last she remembered, she had wiped their memories to keep them safe. She had told herself she might never see them again. Yet here they were, casually asking her to come down as if nothing had happened. Tears welled in her eyes. She stumbled to the door and hurried down the stairs, almost tripping in her haste. In the kitchen, her mother was setting out plates, her father reading the newspaper. They looked up as she entered, smiling warmly at her. "There you are," her mother said. "We thought you were going to sleep all day." Her father folded his paper and grinned. "Big day today. Exams coming up, aren't they?" Hermione froze in the doorway, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. She could only stare at them, alive, whole, and utterly unaware of any danger. No Death Eaters. No war. No Voldemort. She collapsed into a chair at the table, still trembling. They exchanged puzzled glances, but her mother only set a plate of toast in front of her. Hermione touched it absently, her appetite gone. As the day wore on, Hermione moved through the motions of her ordinary life like a ghost. Her school books lay open before her, but her mind could not focus on algebra or history. Instead, she heard McGonagall's crisp voice in her head, saw Hagrid's broad smile, remembered long nights in the common room with Harry and Ron. How could such detail be a dream? How could she have invented friendships that felt so real, so alive? That night, lying in bed once more, Hermione resolved to test her own mind. If she had dreamed it, then it was her imagination at work. But if it had been real, if somehow she had been transported back into an earlier, ordinary life, then there had to be traces, cracks in the illusion. She whispered the incantation of a spell under her breath, Alohomora. She held her hand out as if gripping her wand, picturing it firmly in her grasp. Nothing happened. Frustration burned in her chest, but she tried again, whispering Lumos. Her hand trembled, but no light appeared. She buried her face in her pillow, tears soaking into the fabric. Yet even as she cried, she felt a stubborn flicker inside her. A determination she could not let go of. She had lived through those years, whether dream or memory. She could not accept that they were nothing. Over the following days, Hermione kept testing. She tried every spell she could remember, from the simplest charms to the most complex transfigurations. She even experimented with household objects, willing them to change, to levitate, to respond to her. But nothing worked. It was as though the magic had been stripped from the world entirely. Yet her memories would not fade. She remembered the scent of the Great Hall's feasts, the chill of the forbidden forest at night, the exhilaration of flying on a broomstick. She remembered battles fought, friends lost, choices made. Each memory came with too much weight to dismiss as a simple dream. One evening, unable to endure the torment of doubt any longer, she ventured into town. Her eyes scanned every face she passed, hoping desperately for a glimpse of someone she knew. But all were strangers. At last, her heart nearly stopped when she thought she saw a familiar head of messy black hair across the street. She hurried after him, weaving through the crowd. When she reached him, breathless, her hope crumbled. It was not Harry, just another boy. She stood there in the middle of the street, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. As the sky darkened above her, Hermione realized with chilling certainty that she was truly alone. Whatever had happened to her, whether she had dreamed or been transported, no one else seemed to remember. But she would not give up. She could not. Because if Harry, Ron, and everyone else were real, then somewhere they were still out there. And she would find a way back to them. Hermione woke the next morning with her jaw set and her mind buzzing. The heaviness of confusion lingered, but the despair of the previous night had hardened into resolve. If her years at Hogwarts had been real, if Harry and Ron had truly existed, then she had to prove it. Dreams faded, details blurred, but her memories were sharp, consistent, and full of sensation. No dream could sustain such intricacy for so long. At breakfast, her parents chatted casually about work and school. She forced herself to nod and smile, answering their questions with as much normalcy as she could manage. But inside, she was calculating. She needed information. If magic existed, there must be evidence somewhere in this world. If she could not perform spells herself, perhaps she could find proof in history, myths, or hidden communities. The wizarding world had always been concealed. Maybe she simply had to search harder. She left the house with her schoolbooks in hand, but instead of heading directly to class, she slipped away to the town library. The dusty shelves offered her a comfort she had always known. She searched for anything unusual, occult history, magical traditions, folklore. The more she read, the more fragments she found. Mentions of witches burned at the stake, ancient texts on alchemy, obscure references to secret societies. But there was nothing that confirmed Hogwarts, Dumbledore, or Voldemort. Nothing that suggested a hidden magical world thriving beneath the surface. Her fingers trembled as she turned the pages of a leather-bound volume on British legends. She almost laughed bitterly when she found a chapter on Merlin. Merlin, once revered in the wizarding world, now reduced to myth. If Hogwarts had been real, how had all traces of it vanished so thoroughly? As she shut the book with a sigh, a strange feeling prickled at the back of her neck. Someone was watching her. She looked up quickly, scanning the quiet library. Near the back, at a table half hidden by tall shelves, sat a boy with tousled ginger hair. He was staring directly at her. Her heart leapt into her throat. Ron. For a breathless instant, she was certain it was him. The same shock of red hair, the freckled face, the familiar slouch. She shoved her chair back and hurried toward him, hope flooding through her veins. But when he glanced away and rubbed the back of his neck nervously, she saw the differences. His features were softer, his eyes the wrong shade. Not Ron, but close enough to stab her with longing. Sorry, he muttered when she reached his table. Didn't mean to stare. You looked familiar, that's all. Her throat tightened. She managed a nod before backing away. Familiar. The word echoed in her mind as she returned to her books. What if this world was not a complete illusion, but a mirror? What if the people she knew existed here in different forms, stripped of their magic? That thought haunted her through the rest of the day. In class, she watched her peers with obsessive attention. Could one of them be Harry, in some mundane version of this world? Could Draco Malfoy be just another wealthy student, Hermione's bitter rival over grades rather than blood status? When she returned home that evening, her parents greeted her warmly, asking about school. Their normalcy unsettled her more than anything. She remembered risking everything to protect them, erasing herself from their lives to keep them safe. Now they treated her as though nothing had ever happened. She longed to tell them the truth, to pour out her memories of battles and friendships, but she knew how insane it would sound. That night, she dreamed again. In her dream, she stood in the ruins of Hogwarts. The castle walls were cracked, smoke curling from shattered towers. Harry stood at her side, wand in hand, his green eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Ron was there too, bruised and bloodied but determined. Together they faced Voldemort, who smiled cruelly in the distance. Hermione reached for her wand, and woke clutching nothing but the sheets. Her tears came silently, but the dream strengthened her resolve. She could not let go. The next day, she began her search in earnest. After school, she scoured bookshops, looking for anything out of place. She visited museums, studying artifacts with obsessive curiosity. She even slipped into the darker corners of the internet, where conspiracy theories and hidden communities whispered of strange happenings. Days passed, then weeks. Though she found nothing conclusive, strange patterns began to emerge. Rumors of people who could heal with a touch. Stories of sudden disappearances. Odd, unexplained events brushed aside as coincidences. It was not proof, but it was enough to convince her she was not wrong. One evening, while walking home through the quiet streets, Hermione heard footsteps behind her. She turned sharply. A tall man in a dark coat stood at the end of the street, his face obscured by shadow. He was watching her intently. Fear prickled through her, but so did excitement. Ordinary people did not follow strangers through the night. This could mean something. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to sound braver than she felt. The man did not answer. He only tilted his head, as though studying her. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the alley. Hermione ran after him, her heart hammering. But when she reached the alley, it was empty. No footsteps. No sign he had ever been there. She stood there, breathless, gripping the brick wall for support. Her mind raced. Could he have disapparated? Or was she imagining things in her desperation? Back in her room that night, Hermione replayed the moment over and over. A shadowy figure, watching her with intent. It was too deliberate to dismiss. She knew then that she was getting close, that there were secrets hidden beneath the surface of this world. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, whispering to herself. It wasn't a dream. I'll prove it. The stubborn fire in her chest burned brighter. Whatever this world was, she would not stop until she uncovered the truth. And if the others were out there, Harry, Ron, all of them, she would find them. She had to. Hermione's determination grew stronger with each passing day. She had begun to notice patterns, small cracks in the fabric of this world that made her certain she was not simply imagining things. Objects sometimes shifted when she looked away, subtle changes that no one else seemed to notice. She would place a book on her desk, turn for a moment, and return to find it angled differently. A pen would roll without her touching it, stopping unnaturally, as if guided by an invisible force. These little inconsistencies both frightened and encouraged her. They were not enough to prove magic truly existed here, but they were reminders that this world was not as solid as it appeared. She continued to haunt libraries and bookstores, scouring volumes on myths and legends. She also began keeping a notebook of her own, recording every oddity she observed, every shadow that lingered too long, every flicker of déjà vu. The notebook quickly filled with her neat, methodical handwriting, a testament to her persistence. One afternoon, while returning home from school, she stopped at a small second-hand shop tucked away on a side street she had never noticed before. Its windows were dusty, its sign faded. Something about it tugged at her instincts. She stepped inside, a bell above the door chiming softly. The shop smelled of old wood and mothballs. Shelves sagged beneath the weight of strange objects, antique clocks, chipped teacups, weathered books. At the far end, behind a counter cluttered with trinkets, an old woman looked up. Her sharp eyes fixed on Hermione with unsettling intensity. "Looking for something, dear?" the woman asked, her voice raspy. Hermione hesitated. Just browsing, she murmured, though her heart raced. The woman's gaze did not waver. Or perhaps you're searching for answers. Hermione froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. What do you mean? She asked cautiously. The woman smiled faintly, a knowing expression that deepened the lines on her face. Sometimes people come here when they feel out of place, when they dream of things they shouldn't know. You have that look about you. Hermione's breath caught. You've seen this before? The woman didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached beneath the counter and produced a small, leather-bound book. She slid it across to Hermione. Its cover was cracked with age, its pages yellowed. Take it, the woman said softly. It may help. Hermione reached for the book, her fingers trembling. She opened it to the first page and felt a shiver run through her. Inside were handwritten notes, diagrams of symbols, fragments of incantations. The language was archaic, but she recognized traces of what could only be spells. Her voice faltered. Where did you get this? The woman only shook her head. I've had it for many years. You'll understand more than I ever could. Hermione pressed the book to her chest, a rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Proof. At last, something tangible. She thanked the woman and hurried out of the shop, clutching the book as though it might vanish. Back in her room, she pored over the pages. The handwriting was uneven, the notes fragmented, but she recognized enough to know it was genuine. Some of the incantations resembled charms she had once mastered. She tried them aloud carefully, her hand raised as though wielding a wand. At first nothing happened. But then, faintly, a page fluttered beneath her fingers though the air was still. She gasped, heart racing. It was small, but it was something. That night she could hardly sleep, her mind alight with possibility. If she could coax even a fraction of magic back into this world, she might find a way to restore everything. The following days were consumed with experiments. She tried every spell she could translate, some producing faint reactions, a flicker of movement, a shiver of air, a strange hum that faded as quickly as it came. Each small success strengthened her resolve. Yet the more she experimented, the more she felt the presence of eyes upon her. Twice she caught sight of the same tall man in the dark coat, watching from a distance. He never approached, never spoke, but his gaze followed her with chilling persistence. One evening, after managing to make a glass vibrate faintly on her desk, Hermione collapsed back into her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. She stared at the notebook of spells, her mind racing. Someone had left this knowledge for her to find. Someone believed she would need it. As she mulled over this thought, her bedroom window rattled. Startled, she turned to see a dark shape dart across the sky. For a split second she thought it might be an owl, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. Her chest tightened. If it was an owl, then perhaps she was not as alone as she feared. The next day, she returned to the little shop. But when she arrived, it was gone. The building stood empty, its windows boarded, the sign removed as though it had been abandoned for years. Hermione stood on the sidewalk in shock, clutching her book tighter. A chill swept over her. The woman had known exactly who she was, what she was searching for. And now she had vanished, leaving Hermione with the book and more questions than ever. As she walked home, the air felt heavier, charged with an invisible weight. The world around her looked the same, yet she felt the edges of it shifting. She was no longer sure if she was chasing answers, or if something was leading her toward them. That night, lying awake with the book open beside her, Hermione whispered into the darkness. Harry, Ron, if you're out there, I'll find you. I promise. Her words hung in the silence, fragile yet fierce. Somewhere, she was certain, the world she had lost was waiting for her. And she would not stop until she reclaimed it. Hermione awoke with the leather-bound book still resting on her chest. The faint marks of ink smudged her fingertips, proof that she had spent most of the night reading and rereading its contents until sleep had claimed her. For the first time since waking in this strange version of her life, she felt like she had a thread to follow. Fragile, yes, but undeniable. The morning passed in a haze. Her parents chatted over tea and toast, but their words slipped past her ears. She barely touched her food. Her thoughts clung to the book and to the woman who had given it to her before vanishing without explanation. The more Hermione considered it, the more certain she became that the woman had not been ordinary. Perhaps she had been a witch in hiding, or someone who remembered the world Hermione had lost. That idea both thrilled and terrified her. If others knew the truth, why had they not come forward sooner? What did they want from her? She carried the book everywhere, tucked in her school bag as though it were the most precious thing she owned. During classes, she doodled fragments of spells in the margins of her notebooks. During breaks, she found quiet corners to test incantations, whispering the words under her breath. Most attempts fizzled into nothing, but sometimes she caught faint sparks of movement, as though the world wanted to respond but could not quite break through. One afternoon, while sitting alone beneath an oak tree after school, she tried a levitation charm on a small pebble. She whispered Wingardium Leviosa, her hand angled like she remembered. The pebble trembled faintly, shifting in place. Hermione's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She whispered again, firmer this time, and the pebble lifted a fraction of an inch before tumbling back into the grass. It was the smallest success imaginable, but it was enough to bring tears to her eyes. Magic was here. It was buried, weak, fractured, but it was here. Her joy was short-lived. When she glanced up, she saw him again. The tall man in the dark coat stood across the street, watching her from beneath the shadow of a tree. His stillness unnerved her. He seemed almost unreal, like a figure painted into the landscape. Hermione froze, her heart thundering, but when she blinked he was gone. That night, as she studied the book by candlelight, she caught herself wondering if he was friend or foe. Was he guiding her, testing her, or simply waiting for her to fail? She thought about going to her parents, confessing everything, but the thought of their bewildered expressions stopped her. They could not understand. Not when they belonged to this fragile, ordinary version of reality. Her dreams grew stranger. Each night she walked the corridors of Hogwarts, but the castle was always shifting, crumbling, its staircases dissolving into mist. She would call out for Harry or Ron, her voice echoing into silence. Sometimes she thought she heard them calling back, faint and distant, but she always woke before she could reach them. The following week, Hermione's life split in two. By day she played the role of the diligent student, attending lessons, answering questions with practiced precision. By night she became an investigator, piecing together the fragments of magic hidden in the book. Her grades began to slip, unnoticed by her teachers who were used to her excelling. Her parents grew concerned, asking if she was ill, but she brushed them off with tired smiles. One evening, she lingered in her room long after her parents had gone to bed, candles flickering around her desk. She had been working on a charm of illumination, muttering the words lumos with all the concentration she could muster. Dozens of times she had failed, her hand glowing with nothing but sweat. Yet this time something shifted. A faint glimmer sparked at the edge of her vision, a glow so weak she almost thought she had imagined it. But no, it was real. For a brief heartbeat, her fingers shone with a soft light before sputtering out. Hermione let out a broken laugh, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. It had worked. She had done it. Her triumph was interrupted by a sudden creak outside her window. She whipped her head around, her heart hammering. At the edge of the darkened street, she saw the man in the coat again. He was closer this time, standing directly under the lamplight. For the first time, she caught a glimpse of his face, sharp features, pale skin, eyes dark as coal. Fear surged through her, but before she could react, he lifted his hand slightly. It was a small, deliberate gesture, as if acknowledging her success. Then, just as before, he vanished. Hermione pressed her trembling hands to the desk. Whoever he was, he knew what she was doing. He was watching, waiting. The question was why. The next day at school, she found it impossible to concentrate. Every shadow seemed to hide a figure. Every face seemed suspicious. She felt the weight of the book in her bag, a constant reminder that she was holding onto something dangerous. At lunch, she sat alone, scribbling notes about her latest attempt at lumos. She was so absorbed that she barely noticed someone sit across from her. When she finally looked up, she froze. The boy had messy black hair, untamed and stubborn, and a scar ran faintly across his forehead. Her heart stopped. Harry. But when he looked at her, confused and ordinary, she realized he was not Harry Potter the wizard. Just a boy from this world, carrying a resemblance that made her ache. Sorry, he said awkwardly, adjusting his bag. Didn't mean to sit here if you wanted to be alone. Hermione forced a smile, her chest tight. It's fine. He nodded and dug into his lunch, oblivious to the way she stared at him. She wanted to ask his name, to test if fate had carried Harry into this world under another guise. But the words stuck in her throat. When the bell rang and he left, she sat there trembling, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. She could not escape the feeling that the lines between worlds were thinner than they appeared. That evening, she returned to her room and opened the book again. The pages seemed to hum faintly, as though responding to her growing desperation. She traced the words with her fingertip, whispering into the empty air. If you're out there, Harry, if you're real, I'll find you. I won't stop until I do. Her candle flickered violently, and for the first time, she thought she heard a whisper in response. Hermione barely slept that night. The faint whisper she thought she had heard lingered in her mind like an echo that refused to fade. She replayed it endlessly, straining to remember if it had been her imagination or something real. By dawn, she had made up her mind. She could no longer sit and wait for answers to fall into her lap. The man in the coat knew something, and she was going to confront him. Her parents left early that morning, her father for work and her mother for errands. Hermione lingered behind, pacing her room. She packed her bag not with schoolbooks but with the leather-bound volume, her notebook of observations, and a small flashlight in case her spells failed her. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and excitement. She retraced her steps to the places where she had seen him before. The street outside her school, the alley near the library, the corner by her house. Hours passed with no sign of him. She began to wonder if he only appeared when she used magic. The thought sent a shiver through her. Was he drawn to her attempts, watching her test the fragile limits of this world? That evening, she made her decision. If he came when she practiced spells, then she would give him reason to appear. She set up her desk with the book open before her and lit candles around the room. She focused on Lumos again, whispering the incantation with every ounce of determination she could summon. Her hand shook as she repeated the word over and over, until at last a faint, steady light sparked at her fingertip. The glow was weak, flickering like a dying flame, but it held. Hermione's chest swelled with triumph. Then, as if summoned by her success, she felt it, the presence. She spun to the window and saw him. The man in the coat stood at the edge of the garden, closer than ever before, his face clearly visible in the moonlight. Hermione's fear melted into resolve. She grabbed her jacket, stuffed the book into her bag, and rushed outside before she could lose her nerve. The night air was cold as she stepped onto the lawn. The man didn't move, didn't speak. He simply watched her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Who are you?" Hermione demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Why are you following me?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then his lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "You've remembered," he said at last, his voice low and smooth. Her breath caught. "Remembered what?" "That this world isn't real." Hermione's knees nearly buckled. The confirmation sent a rush of emotions through her: relief, terror, vindication. She stepped closer, gripping her bag strapped tightly. "You know about Hogwarts," she whispered. His smile deepened, though it held no warmth. "I know more than you think." She swallowed hard. "Then tell me, why am I here? Where is Harry? Where is Ron?" He tilted his head, studying her as though weighing her worth. "Those are dangerous questions. Are you certain you want the answers?" Her jaw tightened. "I've been certain since the moment I woke up in this place." The man glanced toward the darkened street, his expression sharpening. "You're not ready yet. But soon." He stepped back into the shadows. "Wait!" Hermione cried, but he was already gone, swallowed by the night as though he had never existed. Hermione stood there trembling, her breath fogging in the air. His words replayed in her mind like a haunting refrain. This world isn't real. Back in her room, she clutched the book, her fingers white-knuckled against the leather cover. She had been right all along. The world around her was not the truth. She didn't know if it was a dream, a prison, or something in between, but she was determined to tear through its walls. The next day she returned to school, but the ordinary lessons felt emptier than ever. The teachers' voices droned in the background, her classmates laughed over trivialities, and Hermione sat silently, staring at the boy with messy black hair 2 rows ahead. She couldn't stop herself. She studied every angle of his face, searching for the spark of Harry hidden beneath the ordinary shell of this world. But when he turned and smiled absently at a friend, she felt a pang of disappointment. It wasn't him. Not yet. That evening she poured herself deeper into the book. Her attempts at charms grew more confident. The pebble that once barely shifted now hovered for several seconds before falling. The glow of Lumos lasted longer, brighter. Each success made her stronger, but it also made her more restless. The man in the coat would return. She knew it. The question was when, and whether she would be ready to demand the truth from him. That night her dreams shifted again. She was back at Hogwarts, but the castle was whole this time, lit with the warm glow of torches. She could hear voices in the distance, familiar laughter echoing through the corridors. She ran toward them, her feet pounding against the stone floor. Just as she rounded a corner, she saw Harry and Ron at the far end of the hall. Relief surged through her as she called their names. But before she could reach them, the hallway dissolved into mist. She woke gasping, clutching her sheets. It was more than a dream. She could feel it. Somewhere they were calling to her. Hermione sat upright, her determination burning hotter than ever. If this world wasn't real, then she would find a way to break through it. She would find Harry, she would find Ron, and she would return to the life she remembered. The man in the coat had said she wasn't ready. Fine. She would make herself ready. Whatever it took. Hermione began to live a double life. By day she wore the mask of a dutiful daughter and ordinary student, blending into the humdrum rhythm of school and family dinners. By night she became something else entirely, a seeker pushing the limits of a world that was not her own. The leather-bound book never left her side, and her room became a laboratory of whispered incantations and quiet experiments. The progress was slow, maddeningly so, but unmistakable. The pebble that once twitched now rose smoothly into the air, hovering as long as she willed it. The glow of Lumos steadied into a faint but constant light. Even the simplest spells filled her with exhilaration, a reminder that she was more than this world allowed her to be. Yet with every small victory came unease. She felt the boundaries of the false world pressing against her, resisting her attempts to tear it open. The whispers in her dreams grew clearer, but also more urgent, as though Harry and Ron were calling out warnings she could not fully hear. And always, in the corner of her vision, lingered the shadow of the man in the coat. He returned 3 nights after their first confrontation. Hermione had been practicing a shielding charm, sweat dripping down her forehead as she pushed herself harder than ever. The candle flames in her room had flickered violently, nearly extinguishing. When she stumbled to the window for air, she saw him again. This time she didn't hesitate. She stormed outside, wandless but defiant, the book clutched against her chest. The man stood at the edge of the garden, as still as stone. "You keep watching me," Hermione said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "If you know what's happening, then stop hiding the truth. Teach me." The man's expression was unreadable. "You are too eager." "Eager?" she snapped. "I've been trapped in a lie. Everyone I care about is gone. If there's a way out, then tell me. If not, then stop wasting my time." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the man raised a hand, and the air shimmered faintly around his fingers. Hermione's breath caught. It was magic, unmistakable, and controlled with precision. "You've remembered much," he said quietly. "But memory is not enough. You must prove you can survive the truth." Her chest tightened. "Survive?" He extended his hand, and suddenly the garden shifted. The ordinary hedges and flower beds dissolved, replaced by stone walls and looming shadows. Hermione staggered back, her surroundings twisting into the cold interior of a vast, crumbling hall. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth. She realized with horror that she stood inside a memory of the Battle of Hogwarts. Figures materialized in the distance, blurred like shadows, moving closer with menacing intent. Hermione recognized the outlines of Death Eaters, their wands raised. Panic surged through her. She had no wand, no allies. Only the fragile sparks of magic she had managed to coax from this false world. "Defend yourself," the man's voice echoed, though he was nowhere to be seen. "Or be consumed." Hermione's pulse roared in her ears. She raised her trembling hand, whispering the words she knew. "Protego." The shield charm faltered, shimmering weakly before fading. A curse from the nearest figure slammed into the floor at her feet, showering her with sparks. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stand firm. She pictured her wand in her hand, imagined its weight, the familiar wood against her palm. "Stupefy!" she cried. To her shock, a bolt of red light shot from her fingertips, striking one of the shadowy figures and sending it crashing back. Adrenaline surged through her veins. She cast again, her voice steadier. Another figure fell. The shield charm strengthened, holding against the next assault. She moved with growing confidence, spell after spell flowing from her as if some dormant part of her soul was waking again. At last the figures dissolved, vanishing into smoke. The crumbling hall melted away, and she was back in her garden, gasping for air. The man in the coat stood before her, his expression calm but his eyes sharp with appraisal. "You are beginning to remember what you are," he said. "But this world will fight you. The more you awaken, the more it will try to break you." Hermione's hands shook, but she straightened her spine. "Then let it try." For the first time, a flicker of approval crossed his face. "Very well. You will see me again." He turned and walked into the shadows, disappearing as effortlessly as before. Hermione sank to her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion. The memory of spells sparking from her hands still burned through her. She had fought shadows, yes, but she had fought them with real magic. She returned to her room and collapsed onto her bed, staring at the ceiling. Every part of her ached, but beneath the weariness blazed a fierce determination. The man was right. The world was resisting her, trying to keep her subdued. But she would not yield. That night her dreams returned, clearer than ever. She saw Harry again, his face illuminated by torchlight. His lips moved, forming words she could almost hear. When she reached out, he reached back, their hands nearly touching before the dream shattered. Hermione woke with tears on her cheeks and the fire of resolve burning stronger than ever. She was ready for whatever came next. Hermione awoke with her heart still racing from the dream of Harry. His face, so close yet unreachable, lingered in her mind as vividly as if she had truly seen him again. She pressed her hands to her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Each time she dreamed, the pull toward that world grew stronger, and the dullness of this reality became unbearable. School felt even more alien that day. The chatter of her classmates about tests and television shows grated against her nerves. Their lives seemed impossibly shallow compared to what she knew was waiting beyond this veil. When her teacher called on her, Hermione stumbled over the simplest question, her mind already far away. She could feel the world pressing harder, trying to smother the spark she had reignited. That night, she didn't wait for the man in the coat to come. She sat in the garden with the book open across her lap, practicing spells until her hands shook with fatigue. The hover charm lifted objects higher now, and she could hold the lumos for minutes without faltering. But it wasn't enough. She needed guidance, not scraps of memory and guesswork. "Show yourself," she whispered into the night. "I know you're watching." At first there was nothing. Then, as though the shadows themselves obeyed her call, he stepped forward. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but his presence no longer filled her with dread. "You called me," he said simply. Hermione stood, clutching the book against her chest. "You said I needed to prove I could survive. I did. Now teach me properly. If this world is going to fight me, then I need to be ready." He studied her in silence, as though weighing something invisible. At last he nodded once. "Very well. But understand this. What you seek is not knowledge, it is awakening. Knowledge you already carry inside you. My role is not to give, but to force you to remember." "Then do it," she said, her voice fierce. His hand flicked outward, and the garden vanished. Hermione staggered as the ground beneath her shifted to rough stone. This time she stood in a dense forest, the trees towering and cold, their branches weaving into an impenetrable canopy. The air smelled of damp leaves and ash. She knew this place. The Forest of Dean. A whisper of nostalgia nearly buckled her knees, but there was no time. A figure stepped from the shadows. It was Ron, or something shaped like him. His eyes glowed unnaturally, and his voice was a distorted echo. "You left me," the shadow hissed. "You chose Harry over me." Hermione's chest clenched. She knew this was not truly Ron, yet the accusation stung like truth. The figure raised a wand, and a curse shot toward her. She barely managed to shield herself, the impact sending her stumbling backward. The man's voice echoed from nowhere. "Face what you fear, or it will destroy you." Hermione forced herself to breathe. She reminded herself this was not Ron, but the embodiment of her guilt and doubt. She steadied her stance and conjured the image of her wand once more. "Expelliarmus!" she cried, and the curse struck the false Ron's hand, sending the wand spinning away. But the shadow laughed, its body unraveling and splitting into two more figures. They circled her like predators, their voices mocking. "You'll never save them. You'll never get back." Anger blazed through Hermione, stronger than fear. She refused to believe it. She lifted her hand and shouted, "Expecto Patronum." For a moment nothing happened. Then, from deep inside her, light erupted. It burst forth as a silver otter, bright and powerful, leaping across the ground. The shadowy figures recoiled with shrieks, their forms dissolving into mist. The otter swirled around Hermione before fading into the night, leaving her breathless but triumphant. The forest melted away, and she was back in her garden, her body trembling from the effort. The man in the coat stood before her, his head slightly inclined in approval. "You remembered," he said. "That charm is not taught by books. It comes from who you are. You are beginning to see through the veil." Hermione's chest heaved. "Then help me tear it down." "Not yet. Each step you take makes this false world push back harder. If you move too quickly, it will break you before you are ready." His gaze was piercing. "You must balance patience with determination." Hermione wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but she bit it back. He was right. Rushing blindly could cost her everything. Still, the glimpse of her patronus left her shaken with hope. It had been real, undeniably real. The man turned away. "We will meet again when you are ready. Until then, listen to your dreams. They will guide you as much as I can." And then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows. Hermione sank to the grass, hugging the book to her chest. The echo of the patronus still glimmered inside her, fragile but brilliant. She thought of Harry's hand reaching for hers in her dreams, and for the first time since waking in this false world, she let herself believe she could reach him again. That night, her dreams came swiftly. Harry stood before her in the room of requirement, clearer than ever before. This time, his voice broke through the haze. "Find me, Hermione," he whispered. "We don't have much time." She woke with tears on her face and fire in her heart. The path was set. She was going to find him. Hermione's dream of Harry haunted her the entire day. The words he had spoken rang louder than any lecture, louder than her parents' voices at breakfast, louder than the chatter of classmates in the corridors. "Find me. We don't have much time." It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a message, clear and urgent. She carried it like a secret flame inside her chest. Every time she blinked, she saw Harry's face, the way his lips had shaped the words, the desperate intensity in his eyes. And for the first time since waking in this false world, she was no longer certain that Harry was only in her dreams. Something had shifted. She could almost feel him pressing against the boundaries of this reality, straining to break through. That evening, she sat with her book, tracing the familiar spells she had practiced again and again, but her concentration slipped. The garden was quiet, too quiet, and she found herself glancing over her shoulder, expecting him, the man in the coat, to appear. Yet the shadows remained empty. Instead, something else happened. The lights in her bedroom flickered as she carried the book inside. She set it on her desk, heart racing, when the mirror above her dresser rippled as though water had replaced glass. Hermione froze, her breath caught in her throat. Then slowly an image began to form. Harry. He stood on the other side of the mirror, his figure faint and wavering, like a projection through fog. His face was pale, lined with exhaustion, but unmistakably him. His eyes widened as if he could see her just as clearly. "Hermione!" His voice cracked with disbelief. Her hands trembled as she touched the glass. "Harry, is it really you?" The mirror pulsed beneath her fingertips, warm, alive. Harry pressed his hand against the other side, aligning with hers. The contact was separated by a thin veil of unreality, but it was the closest she had felt to him since the day she woke in this false world. "I don't have long," Harry said, his voice strained. "This place, whatever it is, it's not just a dream. It's a prison. We've been trying to reach you. Ron and I, we thought we'd lost you." Hermione's chest ached. I thought I'd lost you. I thought none of it was real. That everything, our whole lives together, was just something I made up. It's real, Harry insisted. It's all real. Hogwarts, the war, everything. Someone, or something, has trapped you here. You're being kept away from us. And if we don't find a way to pull you back soon, the world will. Hermione, it will change without you. It already has. Her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. Tell me what I need to do. But before Harry could answer, the mirror flickered violently. His image distorted, his voice garbled. She caught fragments, words that slipped like water through her fingers. Find the anchor, the fracture, trust. And then the mirror cracked down the center, splintering his face into fragments before going dark. Hermione cried out, her hand still pressed against the cold, lifeless glass. The silence that followed was unbearable. She sank onto her bed, clutching the book to her chest. Tears burned her eyes, but they were not only tears of sorrow. They were fueled by renewed certainty. Harry was alive. Ron too. And they were trying to get her back. Later that night, she returned to the garden, standing beneath the moon with her wandless hand raised. The man in the coat appeared from the shadows as though summoned. You saw him, didn't you? His voice carried no surprise, only inevitability. Hermione turned on him, fire in her eyes. You knew this would happen. You knew they were trying to reach me. He studied her silently for a moment before speaking. The veil weakens the more you fight it. You and your friends are tied together in ways even this false world cannot sever. But be warned, the more they succeed in reaching you, the harder this prison will try to hold you. I don't care, she snapped. I'll fight as hard as I have to. Just tell me how to break free. You cannot do it alone, he said. You must find the fracture. Somewhere in this world is a weakness, a place where the truth leaks through. That is where you will begin to tear it open. Hermione clenched her fists. The word echoed in her mind, the same one Harry had tried to say before the mirror shattered. The fracture. Where do I find it? She demanded. The man's expression darkened, his gaze drifting to the stars above. You will know it when you see it. But beware, Hermione Granger. The fracture will not only reveal the truth, it will reveal what has been hidden from you. And not all truths are meant to be borne. Hermione's breath came fast, but she refused to flinch. Then I'll bear them. I'm not afraid. He tilted his head, the faintest flicker of something like respect crossing his face. We will see. And then, as always, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Hermione alone with the echo of Harry's voice and the promise of the fracture. She looked back toward the cracked mirror in her room, her determination hardening. For the first time, she wasn't just remembering. She was being remembered. And she wasn't going to stop until she tore down the walls of this prison and found her way back to them. Hermione spent the next few days in a restless haze. Every corner of her world seemed suspicious now, as though the fracture might be hidden behind the most ordinary of places. The library where she had once studied seemed too quiet. The streets of her neighborhood felt stretched, repeating houses and lampposts as though painted by a careless hand. Even her parents' voices sounded slightly off, too measured, as if someone had written their lines for them. She studied them carefully during dinner, noting every movement, every pause between words. Were they real? Or just parts of the prison? When her father asked about school, she almost snapped at him, demanding to know if he was even her father at all. But she bit her tongue. If she was going to find the fracture, she needed to be observant, not reckless. That night, she opened the cracked mirror again, tracing the fracture down its surface. The crack glowed faintly when her fingertips brushed against it, sending a shiver up her arm. Could this be it? The weakness Harry had mentioned? She whispered a spell from the book, one she had not yet dared to try. Aprio veritatem. Reveal the truth. The mirror shuddered violently, but instead of showing Harry, it flared with blinding light before going dark again. Hermione stumbled back, shielding her eyes. When she looked again, the crack was gone, the mirror whole as though it had never been broken. Her chest tightened. The prison had healed itself. It was fighting back. The next day at school, the fracture revealed itself in an unexpected way. Hermione was walking through the corridor when she noticed something strange. A group of students ahead of her were laughing, but the sound repeated itself unnaturally, looping in a hollow echo. One girl's laugh ended, and then began again in the exact same rhythm. Hermione froze, staring. The scene replayed twice more before smoothing out as though nothing had happened. No one else seemed to notice. Her hands shook as she clutched her books tighter. This was it. A glitch in the fabric of her prison. She was certain of it. That night she returned to the garden, waiting for the man in the coat. When he appeared, she wasted no time. I found it. At school. The world, it repeated itself. Like a memory stuck on loop. He regarded her calmly. Then you are closer than I thought. The fractures grow when the world begins to falter. But be careful. If you force them too wide before you are ready, the prison will collapse onto you. Then teach me how to open them safely, Hermione demanded. The man's lips curved faintly, though it was not quite a smile. You already know. It is not about breaking, it is about remembering. The more you reclaim of yourself, the more the fractures will widen on their own. Hermione's breath quickened. She thought again of Harry's hand against the glass, of his desperate words. She was not imagining any of it. It was all real, and she was the one holding the key. That night her dreams came violently. She was running through the Hogwarts corridors, spells exploding around her. The castle shook as though under siege. Smoke and rubble filled the air. She turned a corner and saw him, Ron, his red hair glowing in the firelight. His face was fierce, his wand raised. Hermione, he shouted, his voice breaking through the dream's distortion. He ran toward her, but the corridor warped, stretching the distance between them. She ran too, but each step only pulled him farther away. Don't let go, Ron's voice thundered. We're here, we're trying, don't let them make you forget. Hermione reached out, her lungs burning, but the floor beneath her gave way. She fell into darkness, Ron's voice echoing until it faded. She woke with a scream, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her hands into her sheets. Ron had reached her. He was real, and he was fighting for her. But his words left her rattled. Don't let them make you forget. Was that the real danger? That this world was not only trapping her, but slowly erasing her true memories? Hermione sat upright, clutching her head. The thought made her stomach twist. What if one day she woke up and Harry and Ron were nothing but shadows to her, slipping away until she couldn't even remember their names? The terror of that possibility hardened into resolve. She would not let herself forget. She would not let this prison strip her of who she was. She would fight, no matter how much the world twisted against her. She turned to the book, flipping through pages until she found an ancient charm meant for preservation of memory. She whispered the words, inscribing the spell not onto parchment but onto herself, binding it to her very being. A glow spread briefly over her skin before fading, and she felt a weight lift from her chest. For the first time since waking here, she smiled. The prison might fight to hold her, but she would not give in. She would remember, and she would find her way back. The next morning, Hermione walked through the school corridors with sharpened awareness. Every detail pressed itself into her mind. The echo of shoes against linoleum, the stale scent of chalk dust, the sunlight streaming too perfectly through the windows. She watched closely, waiting for the world to betray itself again. It didn't take long. Halfway through her history class, she noticed the teacher writing on the board. At first it seemed ordinary, but then she realized something strange. His arm moved in the exact same rhythm 3 times, drawing the same words again and again before the chalk marks corrected themselves. Hermione blinked hard, but the loop had already smoothed over, as if nothing had happened. Her pulse quickened. The fracture was spreading. Later, in the cafeteria, the glitch grew worse. She watched a tray slip from a student's hands, clattering to the floor. Gasps filled the air. But then, impossibly, the scene reversed. The tray jumped back into the student's grip, the gasps sucked backward into silence. Time itself had folded, stitching reality over the mistake. Hermione's classmates laughed, unaware that anything strange had occurred. Only Hermione sat frozen, the truth glaring at her like a crack in glass. The world was unraveling. That night, she didn't wait for the man in the coat. She went to the garden, gripping the book tightly, and whispered the memory charm she had cast on herself the night before, just to strengthen it. She could feel the fractures now, as if they pulsed beneath her skin. The prison was weakening. And then it happened. She woke the next morning to find the fracture inescapable. As she walked to school, She saw it in the air itself, a shimmering distortion above the street, like heat rising from asphalt, only sharper. The closer she drew, the more the world seemed to falter around it. Birds froze mid-flight for a second before resuming. A car's engine noise stuttered like a broken record. Hermione stopped dead in her tracks. This was it. The fracture. The very weakness she had been searching for. Her heart hammered as she whispered, "Aprio veritatem." The air tore open. The world around her flickered violently, splitting apart like paper ripped down the center. For a moment she saw beyond. A glimpse of stone towers, torches, the echo of spells clashing. The unmistakable outline of Hogwarts. She gasped, reaching for it, but the prison fought back. The tear shuddered, sparks flying from its edges, and a force like a hurricane shoved against her chest. She stumbled backward, but refused to let go. "No, I won't stay here. Let me through." The tear pulsed wider, revealing more. Figures moved within it, blurry but familiar. She heard Ron shouting, his voice clearer than in her dreams. "Hermione, push harder." And Harry's voice raw with urgency, "We've almost got you." Hermione screamed with effort, pouring every ounce of magic she had remembered into the tear. Her hand stretched forward, fingers trembling, almost breaching the veil. For one breathtaking moment, she felt warmth, Harry's hand brushing hers across the divide. Then, with a violent crack, the prison sealed itself. The tear snapped shut, the air solidifying, reality knitting itself whole again. Hermione was thrown to the ground, gasping, her palms scraped against the pavement. The fracture was gone, leaving only the ordinary street behind. But the damage had been done. The man in the coat appeared beside her, silent as ever. His eyes, usually unreadable, flickered with something she couldn't name, admiration, perhaps, or fear. "You have forced the world to reveal itself," he said softly. "That is no small feat." Hermione sat up, trembling. "I saw them. I touched them. I know it's real." "It is," the man replied. "But now the prison knows your strength. It will not sit idle. It will strike back." Hermione's jaw tightened. "Then let it. I won't stop until I break free." The man inclined his head. "Be careful, Hermione Granger. A prison that knows it is failing is at its most dangerous." As quickly as he came, he vanished again, leaving Hermione kneeling on the cracked pavement, her heart pounding with both terror and exhilaration. She had seen Hogwarts. She had heard Ron and Harry with her waking ears. The fracture was real, and it was growing. For the first time, escape didn't feel like a hope. It felt inevitable. The next few days were anything but ordinary. Hermione noticed it immediately. The world around her no longer flowed as seamlessly as before. It shuddered, twitched, and strained against itself as though cracks were spreading beneath the surface. At first, it was subtle. A teacher's words repeated twice in a row. A neighbor walked down the street in the same pattern of steps 3 times, as if caught in a loop. But soon the distortions became undeniable. Trees shimmered against the sky, bending into shapes that no tree should form. The faces of her classmates blurred, and then snapped back into focus like masks adjusting themselves. The prison was striking back. One night, Hermione woke to a sound in her room, a faint, unnatural scratching. She sat up, clutching the book, and froze. The walls themselves were moving. The wallpaper peeled and twisted as though unseen claws were scraping against it from within. Shapes pushed forward, faces with hollow eyes, pressing against the surface like grotesque imprints. Hermione scrambled out of bed, her voice trembling but fierce. "Lumos!" Light flared from her fingertips, steady and bright. The faces hissed and melted into the wall, leaving it smooth once more. But Hermione's breath came in ragged gasps. The prison wasn't just glitching anymore. It was attacking her. The next day it escalated. Walking home from school, Hermione noticed the street was wrong. The houses on either side looked identical. Same windows, same doors, same curtains fluttering in the breeze. She frowned and quickened her pace, but the street only stretched farther ahead, each house repeating like a mirror image. Her pulse quickened. The world was trying to trap her in a loop. She stopped, closing her eyes, forcing herself to think. Fear would only make it worse. She whispered the words she had bound to herself. "I will not forget. I am Hermione Granger. I remember who I am." When she opened her eyes again, the loop dissolved. The street snapped back to normal, the houses distinct and varied. But the effort left her weak, her knees nearly buckling. That night, she went to the garden, desperate for the man in the coat. He appeared quickly, as though he had been waiting. "It's fighting me," Hermione said, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Everywhere I go, it twists reality. It's trying to break me." The man studied her, his expression unreadable as always. "The prison has realized you are slipping free. It cannot allow that. So it will do what prisons do. It will make you doubt, make you fear, make you surrender. The more you resist, the harder it will fight." Hermione's jaw tightened. "Then I'll fight harder." A flicker of something, approval perhaps, crossed his eyes. "Good. But remember this. The greatest danger is not in its attacks, but in its whispers. It will try to rewrite your mind. If it can convince you to believe in it completely, you will be lost forever." His words echoed Ron's desperate warning in her dream. "Don't let them make you forget." Hermione swallowed hard, her resolve strengthening. "It won't. I won't let it." The man inclined his head. "Then you are ready for the next step. The fracture you opened was only the beginning. To escape, you must not only find another crack, you must tear it wide enough for the truth to pour through. And for that, you will need more than memory. You will need power." "Power?" Hermione echoed. "You've remembered spells. But power comes from more than incantations. It comes from trust, from love, from bonds that cannot be severed." His gaze pierced her. "You must reach them. Not just in dreams, not just in glimpses. You must call to them with everything you are." Hermione's breath caught. "Harry. Ron." "Yes," the man said. "They are your anchor. Call them, and they will come. But be prepared, for when you do, the prison will unleash everything it has to stop you." Hermione's hands shook, but not with fear, with anticipation. She had seen them. She had heard them. Now she would call them. That night, she sat cross-legged on her bed, the book open in front of her. She closed her eyes and whispered their names over and over. Weaving them into the spell, she spoke softly under her breath. "Harry. Ron. Harry. Ron." Each repetition carried not just words but memory. Laughter in the Gryffindor common room, battles fought side by side, nights spent studying under candlelight. The room grew colder. The walls shivered. The air around her thickened as though the world itself recoiled. But Hermione pressed on, her voice louder now. "Harry. Ron. Find me." The mirror above her dresser rattled violently. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, glowing with blinding light. Hermione stood, her heart pounding. And then she heard them. "Hermione!" Two voices cried in unison, breaking through the roar of the prison. Harry's and Ron's. Clear, real, alive. Hermione reached toward the mirror, tears streaming down her cheeks. She could see their silhouettes forming beyond the cracks, reaching back toward her. But even as her fingertips touched the glowing surface, the walls of her room buckled inward, the prison striking back with a fury she had never felt before. The light from the cracked mirror filled Hermione's room, washing away every shadow. For the first time since this nightmare began, she could see them clearly. Harry and Ron, their faces full of desperate determination, their hands reaching toward her as though sheer will could bridge the divide. "Hermione, hold on!" Harry shouted, his voice strained as though pushing through layers of stone. "We've got you!" Ron yelled, his fingers stretching out, almost close enough to brush hers. Hermione's heart soared. They were real. They remembered her. They were fighting just as hard as she was. She pressed her palm against the fractured surface, the glow searing against her skin but not burning. Instead, it felt alive, like raw magic answering her call. But the prison was not about to surrender. The walls around her groaned, bending unnaturally as though made of molten glass. Her bed frame snapped apart, the mattress twisting upward like a serpent. The ceiling lowered, pressing down on her, threatening to crush the air from her lungs. The air grew thick with whispers, thousands of voices murmuring in unison. "Stay! Stay! Stay!" Hermione gritted her teeth. "No, I will not stay. I am not yours." The whispers rose into a screech, and the mirror cracked further, sharp edges splintering outward. Harry and Ron's forms flickered, fading in and out like unstable shadows. "Hermione, don't let go!" Harry's eyes blazed with urgency. Ron's voice broke. "They're trying to pull you back. Fight it." The floor beneath Hermione dissolved into a churning void. Her feet slipped, her body dragged downward by an unseen current. She clung to the mirror frame, her fingers digging into the wood as it warped and writhed in her hands. "No!" she cried, fighting against the pull. Her mind blazed with memory, Hogwarts, laughter by the fire, their faces full of trust and love. She forced every thought into her voice. "Harry, Ron, I will not forget you." A burst of light erupted from her chest, surging into the mirror. The cracks blazed like lightning, and for an instant, she was certain she could step through, certain she could join them. Her foot lifted, crossing the boundary, and then the prison struck with all its might. The ceiling crashed down in a wave of darkness, the walls folding inward. The mirror shuddered violently, its surface splintering into 1,000 shards that cut across Hermione's arms and face as they exploded outward. She screamed, reaching desperately for the fading silhouettes of her friends, but the fragments dissolved into smoke before her eyes. The light was gone. The room was silent. The prison had sealed itself again. Hermione collapsed onto the floor, shaking, blood dripping from shallow cuts along her skin. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but her eyes were bright with fury rather than despair. She had seen them. She had touched them. She was not imagining it. The prison could break the mirror, but it could not erase what had happened. She curled her hands into fists, ignoring the sting of her cuts. "You will not keep me here," she whispered to the silence. "You can tear the world apart around me, but I will find them. I will get out." The air shimmered faintly in response, almost as though the prison itself was listening. A cold dread spread through her as she realized it was no longer simply reacting. It was watching, studying her, adapting. That night, when she closed her eyes, her dreams were darker than ever. She stood in the corridors of Hogwarts, but they were wrong, endless, twisted, each portrait's eyes black and hollow. She ran through the corridors calling Harry and Ron's names, but the only sound was her own echo. At the end of the corridor, a door appeared, and when she opened it, she froze. Harry and Ron were inside, but chained, bound by twisted black tendrils that pulsed like veins. Their faces were pale, their eyes dull, and when they spoke, their voices were lifeless. "You cannot save us, Hermione," Harry said. "You belong here," Ron added. Hermione's knees shook, but she stepped forward. "No, that's not you. This is another lie." The figures snarled, their forms dissolving into faceless shadows that lunged at her. She raised her wand and shouted, "Expecto Patronum." A brilliant otter burst forth, light flooding the darkness, driving the shadows back. The chains shattered, the tendrils withering. And for just a moment, the real Harry and Ron appeared again, their eyes clear, their voices strong. "Keep fighting," Harry urged. "We're with you," Ron said. Hermione woke with tears on her cheeks and fire in her heart. She had not lost them. She could still reach them. But she also understood the truth now. The prison was no longer just holding her. It was trying to turn her against herself. If she faltered, if she believed the lies for even a second, she would be lost forever. And so she made her choice. The next time she saw the man in the coat, she would demand answers. She would learn what the prison truly was and how to destroy it. Because Hermione Granger had never backed down from a fight. And this would be the greatest battle of her life. The garden was still when Hermione slipped outside in the early morning, the grass damp with dew, the air sharp with chill. She clutched the book tightly, her eyes sweeping the shadows for the familiar figure. He always came when she needed him, but this time it was different. This time, she would not wait for riddles or cryptic half-truths. She needed answers. The man appeared without sound, stepping from the darkness as though he had been a part of it. His long coat brushed against the grass, and his eyes gleamed faintly beneath the brim of his hat. "You've been pushing too hard," he said, his tone low and grave. "The prison strikes harder with every move you make." Hermione narrowed her eyes. "I touched them. Harry and Ron. They reached for me. The prison tore it apart, but I know it was real." The man inclined his head slightly, almost respectful. "It was real." Hermione's voice hardened, then stopped speaking in half-answers. "You know more than you've told me. What is this prison? Why me? Why now?" For a long moment, the man was silent, his gaze fixed on her as though weighing the measure of her resolve. Then he stepped closer. You are beginning to remember what they did not want you to. That makes you dangerous. Who are they? Hermione demanded. The architects, he replied, his voice like a whisper carried on wind. The ones who built this cage around your mind. They feared you, Hermione. They feared what you might become if you reached your full strength. And so they chose the cruelest path. They trapped you inside your own story, then buried that story beneath another life entirely. Hermione's breath caught. You're saying all of it, the war, Hogwarts, Harry, Ron, it was taken from me and locked away? He nodded. Not erased. Hidden. Dormant. They needed you quiet. Harmless. But even the strongest prison cracks with time, and you were never meant to be silenced. Hermione's hands trembled against the book. The idea burned in her chest, infuriating and heartbreaking all at once. Then who are you? Why can you come and go when no one else can? The man tilted his head, his expression unreadable. I am not your jailer. I am not your savior either. Think of me as a fracture given shape. I exist because the prison is breaking. Every time you resist, every time you remember, I grow stronger. I am the echo of what you fought for, and the reminder of what waits beyond these walls. Hermione studied him, her mind racing. If he was tied to the prison itself, then he was as much a danger as a guide. But she also knew he had been the one to push her toward remembering. Without him, she might have drowned in the illusions. Then help me, she said firmly. Not with riddles. Not with warnings. Tell me how to break free. The man's lips curled into something almost like a smile. That is the question every prisoner asks. But freedom is never given, it is taken. And to take it, you must understand what binds you here. Hermione's voice softened. What binds me? He gestured to the book clutched in her hand. That is the key. It is not merely a record of what you've remembered. It is a map. Each spell you've written, each memory you've anchored, is a crack in the walls. But a map is useless without a destination. The prison is vast and layered, crafted from fears and lies. To escape, you must find its heart. Hermione's mind snapped to her dreams, the twisted corridors, the black tendrils, the endless whispers. The heart, it's not just a place, is it? It's alive. The man's eyes glimmered. You see more clearly than most. Yes. The prison is not stone or steel. It breathes. It thinks. It adapts. And its heart will fight harder than anything you've faced. Hermione clenched her jaw. Then I'll fight harder. The man's gaze lingered on her, unreadable, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw something like pride in his eyes. Then he turned slightly, his figure fading back into shadow. When the time comes, you will not be alone. Remember that. Wait, Hermione stepped forward, but he was already gone, leaving only silence and the faint rustle of leaves. She stood alone in the garden, the book heavy in her arms, her heart pounding with new determination. The prison had a heart, and if she could reach it, she could tear it apart from the inside. That night, she opened the book again, her pen scratching across the pages as she recorded every fragment of memory, every spell, every glimpse of Harry and Ron. But this time she also drew. Her hand moved almost without thought, sketching the twisting corridors, the black chains, the faceless shadows. At the center of the page, she drew a pulsing shape, a mass of tangled tendrils wrapped around a blinding light. The heart of the prison. She stared at it, her chest tight, her resolve sharpening like a blade. The battle had begun, and she would not stop until she reached that place and tore it open. And somewhere deep within the prison, beyond her sight, something stirred, something vast, ancient, and aware. It had felt her gaze. It had felt her defiance. For the first time, the prison itself seemed to shudder. Hermione barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the heart she had drawn in the book, tangled tendrils, a blinding light trapped within. It pulsed in her thoughts, as though the very act of sketching it had forged a connection. She felt it calling to her, not with words, but with a presence, like a heartbeat echoing in the silence of her mind. By dawn, her decision was made. She could not wait for another glimpse or another attack. If she wanted to escape, she had to go deeper. She had to find the layers beneath the surface illusions, follow the cracks, and make her way to the prison's core. She set her book on her desk, its pages glowing faintly in the dim light, as though alive with her determination. She placed her hand on the open page and whispered, "Show me the way." The ink shifted beneath her fingers. The sketches of corridors twisted, aligning into a path, symbols forming at each bend. A map revealed itself, complex, shifting, but undeniably clear in its destination. The air thickened. The walls of her room wavered. And before Hermione could second-guess herself, the ground gave way. She was falling. When she landed, she was no longer in her bedroom. She stood in a corridor lined with stone, damp and cold, stretching endlessly in both directions. Torches burned with pale blue flames that cast no warmth. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint drip of water echoing from somewhere unseen. She recognized it instantly. The deeper layers. Hermione drew her wand, her other hand tightening around the book. "This is it," she whispered. One step closer. The map glowed faintly on the page, its lines shifting as though adjusting to her movements. She followed it, each turn leading her deeper into the labyrinth. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins under skin, and she had the eerie sensation that the corridor itself was alive, listening. After what felt like hours, the air grew colder. A familiar shape appeared ahead, Hogwarts' Great Hall. She stopped dead, her chest tightening. It was perfect in every detail. The enchanted ceiling alive with stars, the long wooden tables filled with laughter and chatter, the smell of pumpkin pasties drifting through the air. And there they were, Harry and Ron, sitting side by side at the Gryffindor table, waving her over. Her legs almost carried her forward without thought. The ache of longing was nearly unbearable. But then she looked down at the map. The glowing lines pulsed red, warning her. This wasn't the way. Hermione's grip on her wand tightened. "You won't trick me," she said aloud, though her voice cracked under the weight of temptation. The laughter in the hall faltered. The students at the tables turned their heads toward her in unison, their eyes black and hollow. Their mouths stretched into identical smiles. Harry and Ron stood slowly, their movements stiff and unnatural. "Hermione," they said together, voices echoing in a sickening harmony. "Stay with us." Hermione lifted her wand, steady despite the chill creeping through her. "You're not them. They are real. You are not." The great hall dissolved like smoke, the false figures collapsing into pools of shadow that slithered away into the cracks of the stone floor. The corridor returned, colder than before, the torches flickering violently. The prison had shown its hand, and it had failed. But Hermione's heart still ached. For a moment, she had wanted so badly to run to them, to let herself believe. The prison knew her weaknesses. Next time, it would strike deeper. She pressed on, the book guiding her steps. The path grew narrower, the air heavier, until finally she emerged into a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, lost in shadow, but the walls glowed faintly with shifting runes. At the center of the chamber was a pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting her face with unnerving clarity. She stepped closer, her reflection staring back at her, but there was something wrong. The reflection did not move with her. It stood still, eyes burning with cold light. "Clever girl," the reflection said, its lips curling into a smirk. "But cleverness alone will not save you." Hermione froze, her stomach twisting. The voice was hers, but sharper, crueler, filled with venom. The reflection stepped out of the pool, its form solidifying, until another Hermione stood before her. Same hair, same eyes, same face, but different. Where Hermione's eyes held fire, this one's were cold embers. Where Hermione's stance was defiant, this one's was predatory. "I am what you deny," the double said. "I am the part of you that knows the truth. You will never escape. You don't belong with them anymore. You belong here." Hermione raised her wand. "I will never believe that." The double smiled, wand in hand, mirroring her movements perfectly. "Then prove it." The duel began. The chamber rang with the sharp crack of magic as Hermione and her double clashed, their spells colliding midair in showers of sparks. Blue fire seared across the stone, while shards of light ricocheted like broken glass. Hermione's pulse hammered, her breath ragged, but her focus was razor-sharp. Her double moved with eerie precision, casting spells at the exact moment Hermione did, as though anticipating her every move. "You can't win against me," it sneered, deflecting a stunner with effortless grace. "I am you. Every strength, every weakness, every hesitation, you cannot outfight yourself." Hermione gritted her teeth, sending a wave of fire curling toward the double. "Then I'll outthink you." The double sidestepped, flicking its wand to turn the flames into writhing snakes that slithered back toward her. Hermione's heart jolted, but she didn't flinch. With a sharp motion, she froze the serpents into ice, then shattered them with a flick. The shards clattered against the floor, echoing like broken glass. The double's smirk widened. You're clever. Always clever. But tell me, Hermione, what good is cleverness when it's all for nothing? Do you know how long you've been here? Do you even know what year it is in the world outside? Hermione's spell faltered for the briefest second. The double's eyes gleamed. Ah, you hadn't thought of that, had you? While you waste time scribbling in your little book, the world moves on. Harry and Ron, they might have forgotten you already. Perhaps they've built lives without you. Perhaps they've learned to live without you. Hermione's throat tightened, but she forced herself to meet its gaze. No, they haven't. I've seen them. I've heard them. They are fighting for me. The double laughed, the sound chillingly identical to her own. Fighting? Or pitying? Do you know what they see when they look at you? A girl who was too weak to wake up. A friend who couldn't save herself. Hermione's anger flared, her magic surging with it. Stop it, she shouted, sending a jet of light so strong it cracked the stone floor as it sped toward the double. The reflection deflected it with a lazy twist of its wand, though its arm trembled faintly afterward. There it is. The fury. The stubbornness. That's why they chose you, you know. Not because you were the brightest, not because you were brave, but because you were easy to manipulate. Always desperate to prove yourself. Hermione froze, the words striking deeper than she wanted to admit. The double's smile widened, sensing weakness. They never needed you. Not really. Harry had his destiny. Ron had his loyalty. And you? You clung to them because without them, you're nothing. You were the sidekick in someone else's story, Hermione. And now you're trapped in your own prison because you can't accept that truth. Hermione's wand trembled in her grip. For a heartbeat, doubt gnawed at her, whispering insidiously. Was it true? Had she only ever been a supporting piece in someone else's life? Had her worth been measured by the shadows of others? No. She steadied her breath, her eyes blazing with defiance. You're wrong. I was never their sidekick. I was their friend. I was their strength when they needed it, just as they were mine. And together, we won a war. Her double smirk faltered. Hermione's voice rose, each word carrying the weight of unshakable truth. That's why you're afraid of me. Because I'm not just clever. I'm not just stubborn. I'm loved. And that love is stronger than any prison you can build. Her patronus burst forth before she even spoke the spell, a brilliant otter glowing so fiercely it illuminated every corner of the chamber. The light slammed into her double, shattering its form into fragments of shadow that screamed as they dissolved into the air. The chamber shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across the walls. The pool of water rippled wildly, its surface glowing with faint light. The prison itself groaned, as though Hermione's victory had cut deeper than it could withstand. Hermione fell to her knees, gasping for breath, but her eyes shone with fire. She had faced herself, the cruelest version of her own doubts, and she had not broken. She was stronger now, her resolve unshakable. She looked at the glowing pool, then at the book still clutched in her hand. The map shifted again, the path clearer than before. She was closer to the heart, and for the first time, she felt the prison recoil in fear. The silence that followed the battle was heavy, almost suffocating. Hermione leaned against the cool stone wall, her chest rising and falling rapidly, sweat clinging to her forehead. She had won, but the victory carried a strange weight. Defeating her double had shaken something loose in the prison. She could feel it, a shift in the air, a trembling beneath her feet, as though the world around her was rethinking its approach. She glanced at the book. The glowing map had rearranged itself again, the lines pulsing faintly, guiding her deeper into the labyrinth. But she hesitated. The prison had failed to crush her with fear and rage. It would not make that mistake twice. Its next attack would be subtler, more insidious. And sure enough, as she began walking again, the corridors grew less oppressive. The flickering torches steadied, the cold eased, and the air smelled faintly of parchment and ink. Hermione frowned. Something about it felt almost familiar. Then she turned a corner and stopped dead. She was standing in the Hogwarts library. Towering shelves stretched endlessly, stacked with books that glowed faintly in the golden lamplight. The scent of parchment was stronger here, mingled with candle wax and dust. The soft rustle of pages filled the air. For a heartbeat, Hermione's heart ached with longing. This had always been her sanctuary. A figure appeared between the shelves, Professor McGonagall, her sharp eyes softened with warmth. "Miss Granger," she said, her voice gentle. "I've been waiting for you." Hermione's throat tightened. "No, this isn't real." McGonagall stepped closer, her expression kind. "Not real. Hermione, why would you deny yourself this? You belong here. Among books, among knowledge. This is who you are. Not a warrior, not a fighter, but a scholar. And here, in this place, you could have everything you ever wanted." Hermione's grip on her wand wavered. Every part of this vision was perfect. The endless shelves, the quiet peace, the sense of safety. She remembered nights spent tucked between these very aisles, devouring books by candlelight, her friends sometimes teasing but always respecting her hunger for knowledge. McGonagall's eyes softened further. "The world beyond is pain, Hermione. Struggle. War. Why seek it, when you could stay here forever? With all the knowledge and existence at your fingertips, you could build a better world right here." Hermione's heart pounded. The temptation was sharp, almost unbearable. To have every book, every answer, to spend eternity learning. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. And yet, she forced herself to look down at the book in her hand, the one she had written in with her own memories. Its glow was steady, grounding her. She remembered Harry's laugh, Ron's grin, the battles they had fought together. And she knew. Knowledge was a part of her, yes, but it was not all of her. She lifted her wand, her voice firm. "I will not be caged by comfort. My friends need me. My place is with them." McGonagall's face twisted, her eyes turning black. The library walls shuddered, the shelves collapsing into dust, books shrieking as they dissolved into smoke. The illusion melted away, leaving Hermione once more in the cold stone corridor. The prison had tried to lure her with her deepest love, and it had failed. But Hermione understood now. The prison was no longer trying to frighten her into submission. It was trying to seduce her into surrender. That made it more dangerous than ever. She tightened her grip on the book and pressed forward. The path narrowed, the glow from the map intensifying. She could feel it now, a thrumming in the air that vibrated in her bones. She was getting closer. The heart of the prison was near. Yet even as determination blazed within her, a voice whispered at the edge of her mind, soft and sly. "You cannot fight forever. Everyone breaks eventually." Hermione ignored it, though the weight of its presence sent a shiver down her spine. She knew one thing for certain now: the prison was afraid. And fear was something she could use. Hermione pressed forward, her footsteps echoing louder than before, as if the corridors themselves were amplifying her presence. The walls were trembling now, faint cracks forming in the stone, dust trickling down like sand through an hourglass. She could sense it. She was close to the heart of the prison. But with every step, the air grew heavier, charged with a pressure that pressed against her chest. The glowing book vibrated faintly in her hand, urging her forward. Yet Hermione knew better than to trust what lay ahead at face value. This prison was cunning, ever-shifting, and if it had failed to crush her with fear or seduce her with comfort, it would try something else. Something personal. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood two figures, backs turned toward her, their outlines painfully familiar. One tall, with a messy mop of black hair. The other slightly broader, with a slouch that betrayed years of awkward charm. "Harry," Hermione whispered. "Ron." They turned, and for a moment her heart leapt. Harry's green eyes met hers, warm and steady, just as they always had been. Ron gave her a lopsided grin, the kind that used to make her roll her eyes but secretly comforted her. For a fleeting second, she wanted nothing more than to run to them. But then she froze. Something was wrong. Their movements were too smooth, too deliberate, as though choreographed. Harry's smile lingered a second too long, and Ron's laugh echoed unnaturally in the vast chamber, bouncing off the walls in hollow reverberations. "Hermione," Harry said softly, taking a step toward her. "You've done enough. You don't have to fight anymore. Come with us." Ron chimed in, his voice warm, coaxing. "It's over, Hermione. We're safe now. You're safe. Isn't that what you wanted? Her grip on her wand tightened. No, she said firmly, though her voice trembled. This isn't real. You're not them. Harry's expression flickered, a shadow crossing his features. Not real. You think we're illusions? We fought with you, we bled with you. And now we're offering you peace. The words sliced through her resolve. A part of her wanted to believe them. After all, wasn't this what she had longed for during the war? Peace, safety, an end to endless battles? But deep down, she knew her friends would never ask her to stop fighting when it mattered most. Harry would push her to keep going. Ron would stumble but never quit. The book in her hand pulsed brighter, reminding her of truth. She steadied her voice. You're not Harry. You're not Ron. My friends wouldn't ask me to abandon the fight. They'd be at my side, no matter how hard it got. The illusions stiffened, their faces twisting. Harry's eyes darkened to black voids, and Ron's grin stretched unnaturally wide, splitting into something grotesque. Their voices layered together, echoing in unison. Everyone breaks eventually. Even you, Hermione. The ground beneath her cracked, and shadowy hands erupted from the stone, clawing at her legs, pulling her down. Hermione gasped, stumbling as the hands latched onto her ankles, their touch icy and burning at the same time. The false Harry and Ron advanced, their figures warping into monstrous shapes, elongated limbs twisting grotesquely, voices hissing in her ears. Hermione raised her wand, her voice clear despite the fear clawing at her chest. I will never break. Not here. Not ever. A surge of light burst from her wand, blazing with a brilliance that filled the chamber. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the light. The false Harry and Ron dissolved into smoke, their screams echoing before fading into silence. The hands gripping her vanished, leaving only faint marks on her skin. Hermione collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. She was shaking, every nerve raw, but she had resisted again. The prison had tried to use her love for her friends, twisting it into a weapon. It had failed. As she caught her breath, the book shifted in her hand, opening on its own. Words appeared across the glowing pages. The heart lies beyond. Beware, the prison knows your strength. It will not hold back. Hermione rose slowly, determination solidifying in her chest. The prison was running out of tricks. If it was about to unleash its full force, then so would she. She adjusted her grip on her wand, squared her shoulders, and stepped toward the dark archway that had appeared at the far end of the chamber. The air beyond it pulsed with raw energy, like a heartbeat. The heart of the prison was waiting. The archway loomed before her, its surface shimmering like liquid shadow. Hermione hesitated only briefly before stepping through, her wand raised, the book pressed tightly against her side. The moment she crossed the threshold, the world shifted. She found herself standing in a vast cavern. Unlike the cold stone corridors she had endured, this place throbbed with life, or something close to it. The walls pulsed faintly, glowing veins of red light running through the rock as though she stood inside a living heart. The air was thick, heavy, charged with a power that pressed against her skin and made her hair stand on end. A deep hum vibrated through the ground, steady and rhythmic. The prison's heartbeat. She was here. At its core. The book in her hand trembled violently, pages fluttering as if caught in a storm. It wanted her to act, to strike, to end this. But Hermione knew rushing blindly into a fight was reckless. She needed to understand what she was facing first. She moved slowly, eyes darting around the cavern. At the center rose a great mass of dark crystal, jagged and shifting, its surface swirling with shadow. Shapes flickered inside it, faces, distorted and agonized, mouths open in silent screams. Hermione felt her stomach twist. Were these the souls the prison had trapped over the years? As she stepped closer, the crystal pulsed, and a voice reverberated through the chamber, deep and resonant, shaking her to the core. You should not have come. Hermione clenched her jaw. I had no choice. The voice rumbled again, amused, condescending. There is always a choice. You could have stayed in your dream. Safe. Content. But you tore it apart. For what? For truth? For pain? I chose reality, Hermione shot back, her voice firm. Because without it, nothing matters. The crystal flared, shadows pouring out and twisting into monstrous forms that slithered across the floor. They had no faces, only gaping mouths filled with endless darkness. Hermione's wand hand tightened. These were no illusions. This was the heart's defense, real manifestations of its power. They lunged. Hermione fired spell after spell, her wand movements precise, her incantations sharp. Bolts of light exploded, scattering shadows into wisps of smoke, but more kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds, rising from the walls, from the very ground itself. Her chest burned with exertion as she cast shield after shield, sparks flying as claws raked against her defenses. The book glowed fiercely now, tugging at her mind, urging her to open it fully. Hermione gasped for breath, barely holding back another wave of shadows, and made her decision. She slammed the book down on the ground, pages flying open, runes glowing across its surface. The cavern trembled. A circle of light burst outward from the book, slicing through the shadows, dissolving them into nothingness. For a brief moment, silence reigned. The crystal at the cavern's center quivered, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. The voice roared, no longer calm but enraged. "You dare wound me?" Hermione staggered back, her legs trembling. She had struck it, but not enough. That brief burst of power had taken nearly everything she had left. Sweat poured down her face, her arms heavy from the effort. She knew the prison wasn't beaten. It was only beginning to show its true strength. The cracks in the crystal sealed themselves with a hiss, the faces inside contorting in agony before fading again into shadow. The heartbeat in the cavern grew louder, faster, shaking the ground beneath her. Hermione swallowed hard, forcing herself to steady her breath. She could not afford fear now. The prison was angry, and anger made it reckless. That could be her advantage. She raised her wand again, her voice steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her. "I am Hermione Granger. I have fought basilisks, Death Eaters, and the darkest wizard of our time. You will not be the one to break me." The chamber shook with the prison's furious laugh, and new shadows began to rise. But this time, Hermione did not retreat. She stepped forward, toward the heart. Hermione advanced toward the great crystal, her wand raised high, every muscle in her body trembling from the lingering weight of the battle. The cavern pulsed harder, the heartbeat deafening now, as if the entire prison was aware of her defiance. Shadows slithered along the ground, circling her like predators, waiting for her to falter. But Hermione did not rush blindly into another barrage of spells. She slowed her steps, forcing herself to think. Fighting had carried her this far, but brute force alone would never be enough to destroy something this powerful. If this was truly the prison's heart, then it had a weakness. All living things did. Even illusions had limits. She only needed to find it. The book at her side began to hum again, pages flipping wildly as if guided by some unseen hand. Hermione dropped to one knee, pressing her palm flat against its glowing surface, and words began to scrawl themselves across the page in her own handwriting, though she had not written them. The heart binds itself with memory. Shatter the chains, and the prison will bleed. Hermione read the line aloud, her brow furrowing. Memory. The crystal pulsed at the word, its surface rippling. Faces formed again within it, clearer this time. And not just any faces. Her parents. Harry. Ron. Even professors from Hogwarts, people she had loved, people she had feared losing. Her throat tightened. The prison wasn't powered by raw energy. It was sustained by memories, twisted into chains. That explained why it had assaulted her with illusions. It wasn't just trying to manipulate her. It was feeding on her. The shadows sensed her hesitation and lunged again, their inky forms darting toward her from all directions. Hermione's wand snapped up instinctively. Protego Maxima. A dome of golden light burst outward, deflecting the creatures in a sizzling crackle. But her shield was already straining. She couldn't waste her strength fighting endless manifestations. She had to cut to the core. Hermione focused on the crystal again, her mind racing. "Shatter the chains," she whispered. The book glowed brighter, pages stopping on a memory she hadn't thought of in years. Her 11-year-old self, walking nervously into the great hall for the sorting ceremony. That first night when everything had begun. She gasped. The book wasn't just showing her memories, it was offering them up. And she suddenly understood. If the prison fed on her memories, then the only way to starve it was to willingly give them away, on her terms, not its. Hermione's heart clenched. Was she willing to risk losing pieces of herself? To give up fragments of the life that had shaped her? The shadows pounded against her shield, the crystal pulsing furiously, the voice booming through the cavern. You cannot win without me. Without your memories, you are nothing. Empty. Broken. Hermione's breath shook, but her resolve hardened. She was more than her memories. She was her choices, her will, her strength. And if giving up pieces of the past meant breaking free, she would do it. She pressed her hand firmly against the open book. Take it, she whispered. Take what you need. But you will not own me. The memory of her sorting blazed across the page, then ripped free of her like a thread pulled from fabric. She gasped at the sudden emptiness in her chest, a hole where the recollection had been. But the crystal screamed, its surface splintering as cracks spread wider than before. The shadows faltered, their attacks weakening, as if stunned by the wound Hermione had dealt their master. She could feel it. The prison had been struck where it was most vulnerable. But she also knew the cost. One memory alone would not be enough. If she wanted to truly destroy the heart, she would have to give more. Much more. She staggered to her feet, wand trembling in one hand, book glowing in the other. The cavern was shaking violently now, stones raining from above. The voice bellowed with rage, desperate, furious. Do not do this. Without me you are nothing. I am your anchor. I am your truth. Hermione lifted her chin, determination blazing in her eyes. No, you are my prison, and I will not be caged. She pressed her hand back onto the book, ready to make her choice. The book's glow intensified, spilling golden light across the cavern as though daring the shadows to draw closer. Hermione stood trembling, staring down at the shimmering pages, knowing what she had to do. It wasn't about defeating monsters with spells or resisting illusions anymore. The prison thrived on her past, on everything she had ever held dear. To destroy it, she would have to give up what it used to consume her. Her chest felt tight. The sorting memory was already gone, and its absence left a hollow ache she couldn't put words to. It was as though a thread in the tapestry of her life had been pulled loose. She knew she had gone to Hogwarts, knew she had been sorted into Gryffindor, but the vivid moment, the sound of the hat's voice, the relief, the cheers, was gone forever. A scar, invisible but real. The shadows hesitated now, circling her but no longer striking. They were waiting, as if the prison itself wanted to see if she truly had the courage to go through with it. Hermione lifted her hand over the open book, her voice low but unwavering. Take them. Take what binds you to me. The pages began to turn, settling on another memory. Her parents, waving at her from the platform at King's Cross before her first year. Her mother's proud smile, her father's awkward attempt to hide his worry. Hermione's heart clenched so tightly she almost pulled away. That memory was precious. It was love, the foundation of who she was. Tears burned her eyes. No, she whispered, shaking. I don't want to lose them. But then she remembered the darkness pressing on her chest, the endless tricks, the way the prison had tried to twist her parents' faces into bait. If she clung to those images here, they would never truly belong to her again. They would remain chained in this place, feeding the thing that sought to enslave her. Hermione pressed her palm down firmly. The memory tore free like a piece of her soul being ripped away. She staggered, gasping in pain, as the image of her parents dissolved into golden light and vanished into the book. The crystal shrieked. A jagged crack split across its surface, glowing white-hot, and the cavern trembled so violently she had to cling to the ground to keep her balance. The faces inside the crystal contorted, writhing in agony, and the shadows let out keening wails before dissolving into nothingness. The voice roared. Foolish girl, you are destroying yourself. Hermione forced herself to stand. Her body ached, her chest hollowed by loss, but her eyes blazed with defiance. I'm freeing myself. And everyone else you've stolen. The book flipped again, this time to a memory of Ron, laughing as he shoved a plate of food across the Gryffindor table toward her, teasing her about studying too much. A simple, silly moment, but one that had given her comfort in the darkest days. Her hand shook. Giving this away felt unbearable. To lose Ron's laughter? To know she had loved it, but never remember the sound? The prison was testing her now, forcing her to choose between strength and sentiment. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry, Ron. She pressed her hand down. The laughter faded from her forever. Another crack split the crystal, this one so deep it sent shards of shadow bursting outward like blood from a wound. Hermione stumbled back, her body trembling violently. She was unraveling piece by piece. But she saw it working. The prison's heart was failing. The book flipped again, stopping on a memory of Harry. The night they sat by the fire in the common room, exhausted after a long day, saying nothing but feeling utterly safe in each other's company. That memory was different. It wasn't about victory or knowledge. It was about belonging. Her voice broke. No, please not this one. The book glowed brighter, waiting. The crystal pulsed furiously, trying to resist, to frighten her into stopping. The voice bellowed, desperate. If you take this step, you will never be whole. You will destroy what makes you human. Hermione wiped her tears with the back of her hand. What makes me human isn't memory. It's choice. And I choose freedom. She slammed her hand down. The memory tore away, a piece of her heart ripped out, and Hermione screamed as the crystal exploded with a deafening crack. Shards of dark glass flew across the cavern, disintegrating into smoke as they struck the ground. The faces trapped inside were released, dissolving into streams of golden light that soared upward and vanished. The heartbeat stopped. The cavern fell silent. Hermione collapsed to her knees, gasping, her chest hollow, her mind frayed by the pieces she had sacrificed. She knew she had lost things she could never get back. But as she looked at the shattered remains of the crystal, she also knew she had broken the prison's hold. The shadows were gone. The walls no longer pulsed with life. The cavern was dead. Hermione whispered hoarsely, her voice ragged but resolute. I did it. And then the ground gave way beneath her. The floor crumbled beneath Hermione, the stone giving way like brittle glass. She plunged into the abyss, wind tearing at her robes, her screams swallowed by the darkness. The golden fragments of the shattered crystal spun around her as she fell, dissolving into sparks before vanishing entirely. For a moment, she wondered if this was the end, if breaking the prison's heart had torn reality itself apart. Then she landed. The impact was soft, almost gentle, like falling onto a bed of mist. She lay there, dazed, breathing hard, her chest aching with the hollow spaces where her memories used to be. Slowly, she sat up and realized she was no longer in the cavern. She was in a forest. Sunlight filtered through a canopy of green leaves, dappling the mossy ground. The air smelled of earth and wildflowers, fresh and alive. Birds chirped somewhere above, and a breeze rustled the branches, carrying with it a strange sense of peace. Hermione blinked. It was too perfect, too calm. After everything she had endured, this place felt wrong in its serenity. She rose unsteadily to her feet, clutching the book. Its glow had faded, and when she opened it, the pages were blank. Empty. She shivered. The memories she had given away were gone for good. Even the book seemed to know there was nothing left to guide her now. As she turned in a slow circle, searching for any sign of direction, a figure stepped out from between the trees. Her breath caught. It was Dumbledore. He looked exactly as she remembered him. Half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, long silver beard flowing gently in the breeze, blue eyes twinkling with warmth and mystery. Hermione froze, her wand twitching in her grip. No, you're not real. This is another trick. Dumbledore smiled softly. Perhaps, or perhaps not. That, Miss Granger, is the very question you must answer. She felt anger rise in her chest. I've fought illusions of my friends, my parents, even myself. I won't fall for this again. And yet here you stand, Dumbledore replied gently, his gaze steady. You shattered the heart of the prison, but did you think that would end it? No, Hermione. You are not free yet. You are in the threshold, between dream and reality, between past and future. This place tests not your strength, but your will to rebuild. Hermione tightened her grip on her wand, though doubt gnawed at her. His words felt too precise, too piercing, as though he knew exactly what haunted her. You've sacrificed pieces of yourself, Dumbledore continued, his voice calm but heavy. Memories that shaped you. You believe that makes you weaker. But perhaps, he paused, eyes glinting, it makes you stronger. What is courage, Hermione, if not the ability to stand tall even when parts of you are missing? Her throat tightened. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. The hollowness inside her ached, threatening to consume her if she let herself dwell on it. Why are you here? She demanded. What is this place? Dumbledore's expression grew solemn. The prison has not given up. It could not break you with fear, nor bind you with comfort, nor stop you with temptation. So now it will attempt the last and most dangerous trial. Hermione's pulse quickened. And what is that? Dumbledore's eyes softened. It will ask you to let go. Not of memories this time, but of yourself. The words sank into her like ice. She glanced down at her empty book, her chest aching with the weight of her losses. To give up more, herself, seemed unthinkable. And yet, if this was the prison's final defense, she would have no choice but to face it. Dumbledore stepped closer, his presence both comforting and unsettling. You are stronger than you know, Hermione. But even the strongest must decide. What part of themselves will they sacrifice to reach freedom? Before she could answer, the forest began to shift. The trees twisted, the sunlight dimming into a deep, bloody red. The birds fell silent, replaced by the low hum she had thought she destroyed, the heartbeat. It was still here, faint but alive. Hermione's eyes widened. She hadn't killed the prison. She had only wounded it. Dumbledore's voice echoed as his form dissolved into smoke. The final trial awaits. Hermione stood alone as the forest melted into darkness once more. And then the ground split open, revealing a path of fire leading deeper into the unknown. She swallowed hard, clutching her wand and the empty book, and stepped forward. The path of fire stretched before Hermione, winding downward like a scar into the earth. Heat licked at her skin as she walked, but she did not slow. The book was heavy in her arms, heavier now that its pages were blank, a silent reminder of everything she had already surrendered. Her wand felt light by comparison, as though it alone could not stand against what was coming. The tunnel grew narrower, the walls glowing with veins of molten red. Her breath came ragged in the stifling air, but her resolve kept her steady. She had endured illusions of terror, temptation, and loss. Now the prison's last card was in play, and though she did not yet understand what it meant to let go of herself, she knew she would not stop walking. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. It was unlike anything she had seen before, an endless mirror floor, smooth and black, reflecting the fiery glow above. The air shimmered with heat, and the silence pressed down heavier than stone. At the center of the chamber stood a shape. It was Hermione, but not the twisted, monstrous double she had fought before. This version of her was calm, radiant even. Her hair was neat, her robes spotless, her face serene and unburdened. She carried no book, no wand, no scars of struggle. She was Hermione as she might have been if she had never fought, never lost, never endured. The other Hermione smiled faintly. You've come so far, but you don't have to carry the weight anymore. Hermione's breath caught. The voice was hers, the tone soft but persuasive. She hated how much sense it made. You've sacrificed your memories, the double continued, stepping forward. Her reflection rippled across the black glass beneath their feet. But why stop there? Let go of all of it. Your fears, your burdens, yourself. If you surrender, the pain ends. You will be free. Hermione's heart pounded. The prison's final weapon wasn't fear or temptation. It was release. It wanted her to willingly dissolve herself into nothing. That was the ultimate trap, freedom that was only emptiness. Her double extended a hand. Imagine it. No more weight on your shoulders. No more battles to fight. No more loss to endure. You could rest. Hermione staggered back a step. The words tempted her more than she wanted to admit. She was tired, bone-tired. Every inch of her hurt. The hollow left by her sacrificed memories gnawed at her insides. Would it be so terrible to let go, to stop fighting? The book in her arms remained blank, offering no guidance. She was truly alone now. But then she looked at her double again and felt the wrongness of it. That version of herself was perfect, yes, but hollow. Clean robes, smooth hair, an untroubled face, but no fire in her eyes. No grit. No will. No Hermione. She tightened her grip on her wand. You're not me. The double tilted her head, amused. Of course I am. I am the part of you that longs to stop fighting. You can deny me, but you can't erase me. Hermione's voice grew stronger. You're right. I can't erase you. Because you're part of what makes me human. But I will never surrender to you. The double's smile faded. Her expression hardened into a mask of cold certainty. Then you will burn. The chamber shuddered, flames bursting upward from the floor. The double raised her hand, and the fire obeyed, curling into whips of flame that lashed toward Hermione. She dove aside, the heat searing her skin, and fired a blast of light from her wand. It struck the reflection, shattering it like glass. The chamber howled as though alive, the mirror floor rippling with cracks. The double staggered but did not fall. Instead, she grew brighter, her form blazing with fire, her voice booming through the chamber. "You cannot destroy me without destroying yourself." Hermione stood tall, chest heaving, sweat dripping down her brow. "Maybe not, but I can choose which part of me survives." She raised her wand high, the blank book glowing faintly in her other hand as if stirred by her will. The fire roared around her, the final trial closing in. And Hermione stepped forward, ready to face herself. The chamber pulsed with heat as Hermione faced her radiant double. Flames licked upward from the cracked mirror floor, but she did not flinch. She could feel her heart pounding, not only from fear, but from the crushing realization that this battle was different. Every spell, every step, every thought was a battle against herself. The double raised her hand, and a storm of fire surged forward. Hermione lifted her wand and shouted a shield charm. The barrier trembled under the impact, sparks showering around her, but it held. The mirror beneath her feet reflected the flames, making it seem as though she stood in the center of a world made entirely of fire. "You're wasting your strength," the double said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "You know this struggle is meaningless. I am you without pain, you without burden. Why fight what you could become?" Hermione gritted her teeth. "Because that isn't me. Pain, struggle, scars, they don't make me weak. They make me real." The double's eyes gleamed. "And what is being real given you? Nights of grief, memories that crush you, friendships lost, battles fought until you bled? You sacrificed pieces of yourself already. And for what? A life that keeps breaking you? Let me end it." She hurled another wave of fire. Hermione rolled aside, the book slipping from her arm. It hit the ground with a hollow thud, pages flapping open. For the first time since it had turned blank, faint words began to appear across its surface. Not full sentences, but fragments of thoughts, flashes of memory, whispers of her own heart. She caught sight of one line as she dodged another burst of flame. "We endure because it matters." Hermione seized the book, holding it close, feeling its weight anchor her again. She wasn't powerless. The memories may be gone, but their echoes still lived within her. And those echoes reminded her why she fought. Her wand burned hot in her grip as she pointed it at her double. "If you are me, then you know I'll never surrender." The double's face flickered, the serene smile faltering for the first time. Anger sparked in her eyes, and her flames grew wilder, more erratic. "You think you can outlast me? I am perfection. You are only imperfection. Weakness given form. Then let weakness stand," Hermione shouted, her voice shaking the chamber as much as the fire. "Because weakness is what teaches us to fight." The double lunged, fire wrapping around her body like armor. Hermione met her charge with a blinding spell of pure white light. The two collided at the center of the chamber, fire and light exploding outward in a storm that shattered the mirror floor. For a moment, Hermione felt herself splitting, like her body and soul were tearing apart. The double's fire seared her, but the light inside her burned hotter. She could hear 1,000 voices whispering, her own voice fractured and multiplied, asking her to let go. But another voice rang louder, a voice she recognized not as a memory, but as a truth. It was her own, steady and fierce. "You are Hermione Granger. You endure." The fire wavered. The double's glow dimmed. Her perfect robes blackened with ash, her flawless face cracking under the force of Hermione's will. The double screamed, not in pain but in fury, as if the very idea of imperfection overcoming perfection was unbearable. Hermione pushed harder, her light pressing into the heart of the blaze until it broke apart in a violent eruption. When the fire died, Hermione was alone. The chamber was cracked and scorched, the mirror floor shattered into jagged fragments. She staggered, barely able to stand, but she was still there. Still herself. The book in her arms pulsed faintly. Its pages were not full again, but no longer blank either. Instead, they shimmered with fragments of her story, as if recording her triumph piece by piece. Hermione lifted her gaze. The chamber walls trembled, molten cracks spreading across their surface. The prison itself seemed to recoil from her survival. The trial was not over, but something fundamental had shifted. She had faced herself and endured. Now the prison would have to face her. The chamber groaned as if alive, walls cracking with thunderous force. Molten veins split wider, spilling streams of glowing fire across the shattered mirror floor. Hermione stumbled, gripping the book to her chest, her lungs burning from smoke and heat. The prison itself was breaking apart under the weight of her defiance, as though her victory had undone the very balance that sustained it. A fissure ripped open beneath her feet, sending shards of obsidian glass plunging into a sea of molten light below. Hermione leapt back, barely steadying herself. Her knees buckled, exhaustion clawing at every muscle, but she forced herself upright. She had survived the fire of her own reflection, and now the prison wanted to consume her before she could take her next step. The air rippled with a deep, guttural roar. Hermione froze. The sound was not an illusion's whisper, nor the echo of her own mind. It was something vast, something ancient, something born of the prison itself. The flames along the walls bent inward, forming a colossal shape. It had no distinct form at first, just shifting fire and molten shadow, but slowly it took shape into a monstrous figure. A towering silhouette with wings of flame, claws like spears, and eyes that burned with a hunger that felt endless. The voice of the prison rumbled through the chamber. You have resisted temptation, endured loss, and denied perfection. But now you will face the truth. I am the fire that built this cage. I am the keeper of its trials. And you are nothing. Hermione clutched her wand tighter, though her arms shook. Her throat felt parched, her voice raw, but she managed to force out words. If you are the prison, then you are afraid of me. Otherwise, you would not fight so hard to break me. The monster's wings flared, scattering embers that scorched the ground. I do not fear you. I burn away all who enter. You are no different. Hermione lifted the book, its half-written pages glowing faintly. She felt a quiet strength from it, not enough to overpower this beast with sheer force, but enough to remind her she had not come here to win by strength alone. She had come to endure, to resist, to prove herself. The monster lunged, the floor shattering beneath its weight. Hermione darted aside, rolling across sharp glass fragments. Pain sliced her palms, but she refused to cry out. She fired a jet of white light, which struck the beast's chest. It staggered, flames rippling, but then surged forward with a roar that rattled the chamber. Hermione scrambled to her feet. She could not defeat fire with fire. The prison was made of it. Instead, she had to find what fire could not consume. Her eyes darted around the chamber, searching through the chaos. She saw the jagged shards of the shattered mirror floor glinting faintly through the flames. Mirrors. Reflection. Truth. The idea struck her in an instant. Fire burned everything, but not the truth of what was reflected back. If she could use the fragments, turn them against the beast, perhaps she could make the prison face itself as she had. She sprinted toward the largest shard, heat searing her skin as the monster's claw swiped past her. She dove, grabbing the shard with both hands, the edges cutting into her palms. She turned it toward the creature just as another wave of fire roared toward her. The flame hit the glass and split, refracted into beams of light that lanced outward, striking the beast in its chest and wings. The monster shrieked, its flames faltering where the light cut through. Hermione's chest heaved as she held the shard higher. You are only fire, and fire cannot burn what is real. The beast stumbled, its form unraveling, flames breaking apart into streams of ash and smoke. The chamber shook harder, fissures spreading upward toward the ceiling. Pieces of molten stone rained down, crashing into the mirror floor and vanishing into the molten depths below. Hermione dropped the shard, her hands trembling and bloody. The monster dissolved into smoke, its voice echoing one last time. You have not won. The prison has no end. Hermione's grip tightened on the book. Then I'll keep walking. A massive crack split the chamber open, revealing a spiraling stairway of black stone leading upward, its steps glowing faintly as though daring her to climb. Hermione took one last glance at the collapsing chamber before stepping onto the staircase. Each step hummed with power, pulling her away from the ruins below. The prison had thrown fire, lies, and even herself against her. And still she moved forward. But as she climbed, she could not shake the monster's words. The prison has no end. And for the first time, she wondered if her battle was not to escape it, but to transform it. The staircase stretched upward in an impossible spiral, its steps carved from black stone that glowed faintly at the edges as though lit from within. Hermione ascended cautiously, her breath still ragged from the battle below. The book pulsed in her arm with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat reminding her she was still tethered to herself. Each step echoed louder than the last, the sound hollow and strange, as if the staircase did not exist within solid walls but hung suspended in an endless void. She tried not to look over the edge, but when she did, her stomach dropped. Below her, there was no chamber, no fire, no ruin. Only darkness, swallowing everything she left behind. The higher she climbed, the heavier the air became. Her chest tightened, her lungs struggled for breath, and her legs ached. It was not the exhaustion of battle. This was something else. The staircase itself was pressing on her, weighing her down with an invisible force. She paused, clutching the rail that wasn't there, realizing the staircase had no guard, no boundary. Just steps rising endlessly into the unknown. She whispered to herself to keep moving, but with every step her body grew heavier, as though the prison wanted to crush her with her own weight. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed against a step, gasping. The book slid from her grasp and landed open in front of her. This time, the words written across its pages were clear. The weight you carry is not only the prison's. It is your own. Hermione's hand trembled as she touched the words. Her mind raced with memories. Though fractured and incomplete, they still pressed against her consciousness. The endless hours of studying, the desperate need to prove herself, the burden of being the one who always had the answers. She remembered the loneliness of childhood, the pressure to never falter, the fear of letting others down. She had always carried the weight of perfection, long before the prison twisted it against her. The staircase pulsed as if aware of her thoughts, pressing down harder. Hermione gritted her teeth and forced herself to her feet. Her body screamed in protest, but she clutched the book again and stared upward. "No more," she whispered. "I will not let you turn my strength into chains." She took another step, then another. With each movement, the crushing pressure grew worse, but something shifted inside her. She no longer fought against the weight. Instead, she acknowledged it. She accepted that it was part of her expectations, her fears, her responsibilities. The prison was trying to make her see it as weakness. But she knew it was also the source of her determination. Her pace steadied, her breaths becoming deeper. The words in the book glowed brighter. Strength is not the absence of burden. Strength is carrying it and still moving forward. The staircase trembled violently as though rejecting her defiance. Chunks of stone cracked and fell into the void. Hermione pushed upward faster, refusing to look down. The steps behind her dissolved one by one, consumed by the dark. She had no choice but to keep climbing. At last, after what felt like hours, the staircase ended at a platform of pale stone suspended in nothingness. She stumbled onto it, collapsing to her knees, every muscle quivering. When she looked up, she saw a door standing alone in the center of the platform. Tall, wooden, carved with intricate runes that glowed faintly. It was impossibly ordinary for such a strange place. Hermione rose slowly, approaching it. Her hand hovered above the handle, hesitation gnawing at her chest. She knew that behind this door would not be escape. The prison had taught her nothing came so easily. Whatever waited beyond would be more dangerous, more personal, than anything she had yet faced. She tightened her grip on her wand and whispered to herself, steady and certain. "Whatever it is, I'll face it." She pulled the door open. On the other side was not fire, not darkness, not a monster. It was a library. Rows of towering shelves stretched farther than her eyes could see, filled with countless books, their spines glowing faintly in the dim golden light. The air smelled of parchment and ink, familiar and comforting. For a moment, she thought she had stepped back into Hogwarts. But then she noticed the silence. There were no whispers of pages turning, no footsteps on the floor. Only endless rows of knowledge, and not a single soul within them. And waiting at the center of the nearest aisle was a desk. Behind it sat a shadowed figure, quill in hand, writing in a book identical to the one Hermione carried. The figure raised its head slowly, and though its face was hidden in shadow, Hermione knew instinctively who it was. It was her again, but this time not perfect, not monstrous, not radiant. This was Hermione the scholar, the version of herself who lived only for books, knowledge, and answers. The version who never looked up from the page, who buried herself in study and shut out the world. The prison wasn't finished with her yet. Hermione stepped cautiously into the vast library, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. The silence was oppressive, heavy in a way that made the endless rows of books feel like watchers instead of treasures. She clutched her wand tightly, the book pressed against her chest, as she approached the desk where her scholar double sat. The figure looked up fully now, and the sight made Hermione's stomach twist. It was her, but paler, thinner, eyes sunken from sleepless nights, quill ink-stained fingers trembling with urgency. She looked exhausted yet driven, as though she had not left that desk for years. "Another one," the scholar murmured, her voice brittle and hoarse, though unmistakably Hermione's. Another interruption. Another distraction from the real work. She closed the book she had been writing in and rested her hands atop it, staring at Hermione with an intensity that cut deeper than flame. Hermione swallowed hard. "You're me." "Of course I am," the scholar said, tilting her head slightly. "I am the one who kept us alive. The one who memorized every spell, who solved every riddle, who carried every fact in her head because no one else could. Without me, you would be nothing." Hermione's fingers tightened around her wand. "You're part of me, yes. But you're not all of me." The scholar leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You think courage saved you in this place? You think friendship or compassion kept you alive? No. Knowledge did. Planning did. I did. And yet you fight me as if I'm your enemy." Hermione opened her mouth but hesitated. Deep inside, she knew there was truth in those words. Her mind had always been her greatest weapon. Without her relentless study, she never would have made it through her years at Hogwarts. She never would have helped Harry survive as long as he did. She never would have endured this prison as far as she had. But she also remembered the cost. The long nights where she cried into books, the fear of failing, the isolation she had felt as others laughed while she pored over lessons. The scholar was not wrong, but she was not whole either. The scholar stood, her movements stiff but purposeful. "If you want to pass, prove it. Prove that you can solve what no one else can. If you fail, you accept that your strength has always been me, and you must surrender to me completely." Hermione steadied her breathing. "And if I succeed?" The scholar's cracked lips twisted into the ghost of a smile. "Then you prove you don't need me." Books around them shuddered and shifted, pages fluttering without wind. Volumes fell open, revealing twisting words, riddles, diagrams of runes, fragments of forgotten languages. The entire library seemed alive, whispering questions into the silence. Hermione's pulse quickened. This was not fire or battle. This was a duel of intellect, her strongest field, but also her greatest trap. The scholar lifted a hand, and the nearest book snapped open, its glowing words filling the air in curling smoke. "I have no voice, yet I speak to you. I tell of all things in the world, but you never hear me. What am I?" Hermione's lips parted. She knew the answer instantly, though her throat was dry. "A book." The glowing letters faded into ash, drifting away. Another volume cracked open. "I am always hungry. I must always be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red." "What am I?" "Fire," Hermione said without pause, though the words scraped her throat. The scholar's eyes narrowed. "Clever. But those are nothing." Dozens of books opened at once, their words streaming upward like ribbons of light, twisting together into a storm of riddles, equations, and impossible questions. Hermione staggered back as they swirled around her, threatening to crush her under their weight. The scholar's voice boomed, echoing from every corner of the library. "Answer them all, or be consumed by what you claim to master." Hermione gripped her wand, her mind racing. She could not answer every riddle at once, nor could she drown in them. She had to find a way to turn the scholar's strength against her, just as she had with fire. She raised her wand, shouting above the chaos. "Knowledge without living is nothing. Books mean nothing unless they're carried into the world." The words in the air faltered, their light flickering. Hermione's book pulsed in her arm, glowing with warmth as though agreeing. She stared directly at the scholar. You are a part of me. But I am more than you. I live. I feel. I fight. The storm of riddles stilled, the glowing fragments of questions drifting down like snow. The scholar staggered, her hands trembling over the desk, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Hermione stepped closer, her voice steady now. You don't need to be everything. You don't need to be the only one. You are enough as you are, but I am more. The scholar's quill fell from her fingers. She sank slowly back into the chair, her pale form flickering like a candle in wind. If you let me go, who will remember everything? Hermione knelt, placing her hand on the book. I will, because I am you. But I am not only you. The scholar's form dissolved, scattering into motes of golden light that drifted upward into the shelves. The library fell silent again, but no longer felt oppressive. Instead, it felt warm, alive, almost welcoming. Hermione's book pulsed once more. Its pages filled with new fragments, not riddles, but words of her own, reflections of her victory. She closed it gently, standing tall again. The silence broke. At the far end of the library, between two massive shelves, a narrow passage opened, leading into deeper shadow. The prison was not finished, but Hermione had proven again that she was more than what it threw at her. And now, she would walk further into its heart. Hermione hesitated at the threshold of the narrow passage. The rows of books towered around her, their glowing spines humming faintly as if whispering secrets she had not yet uncovered. She could follow the shadowed passage immediately, pressing on into whatever fresh trial the prison had prepared, but something in her urged her to pause. The library had changed since the scholar dissolved. It no longer radiated suffocating silence. Now it breathed. It felt less like a trap and more like a place that might give her something if she dared to look closer. She moved slowly between the shelves, running her fingers along the bindings. Each book hummed at her touch, vibrating faintly like strings of an unseen harp. They were not ordinary volumes, she realized. They were alive in some way, repositories of knowledge not only written but remembered. And as she walked, her own book pulsed in answer, faint threads of light connecting it to the shelves around her. Her steps carried her deeper into an aisle where the air grew colder, the golden glow dimming to silver. The books here were different, darker, heavier, their covers etched with runes that shifted under her gaze. She reached for one instinctively, then froze. The rune on its spine was familiar. She had seen it etched into the margins of her book when it first began to write itself. Her breath quickened. She pulled the volume free and opened it. The pages were blank for a heartbeat, then words bled into them like ink spilling from an unseen quill. Not riddles. Not temptations. Memories. Her memories. She saw herself at 11 years old, walking into Hogwarts for the first time, clutching her new wand and books too tightly. She saw herself frozen with terror before the troll in the girls' bathroom, the moment she realized Harry and Ron had come for her. She saw long nights of studying, laughter with friends, tears she had hidden, victories she had earned. Hermione staggered, clutching the book to her chest. The prison had stolen her memories, scattered them, and now here they were, shelved like possessions. Dozens, no hundreds, of volumes, each containing fragments of her life. She nearly wept with relief. She wanted to stay, to open every single one, to fill the hollowness inside her with what she had lost. But the book she carried pulsed sharply, as if warning her. When she looked down at it, new words appeared across its surface. Not all memories are meant to return. Some weigh too heavy. Choose carefully. Hermione's throat closed. She scanned the shelves again, her heart twisting. So many lives, so many moments that made her who she was. To regain them all might restore her, but it might also crush her beneath their weight. And yet, to leave them behind felt like abandoning herself. Her fingers hovered over the spines, trembling. Which memories could she bear to reclaim? Which must she leave behind? She closed her eyes and let her heart answer. She pulled one volume free, a small, unassuming book that pulsed warmly in her hands. When she opened it, the words inside burned into her mind, not painfully, but with the warmth of belonging. Harry's laughter. Ron's clumsy loyalty. The quiet pride of McGonagall when she answered correctly. The moment she saw the Gryffindor common room for the first time. The feeling of home. Tears slipped down her cheeks as the memories settled back into her. She felt whole in a way she hadn't since entering the prison, though still incomplete. That was fine. She didn't need to carry everything. Just enough to remember who she was. The shelves around her glowed faintly, as if acknowledging her choice. She slid the book back into place. The others remained waiting, silent, but she turned away. She could not take them all. She had chosen what mattered most. When she returned to the central aisle, the narrow passage loomed ahead, darker now than before. The library had given her a gift, but it would not shield her from what came next. Hermione tightened her grip on her book and wand. The warmth of her reclaimed memories lingered in her chest, a light against the prison's shadows. Without another glance back, she stepped into the passage. The darkness swallowed her. It was colder here, the air damp, the stone beneath her feet uneven. She moved forward cautiously, her wand casting a thin glow. The silence pressed harder than in the library, heavier and more intimate, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen to her breath. After several steps, the passage opened into a cavernous space. A pool of still black water stretched before her, perfectly smooth, reflecting her face back at her. Unlike the mirror floor in the Chamber of Fire, this reflection did not shimmer or distort. It stared back at her exactly as she was, tired, scarred, but alive. And then, slowly, another reflection rose from the water beside hers. Not perfect. Not monstrous. Not scholarly. This one was older. Worn. A Hermione who had lived far longer than she had, with silver streaking her hair and lines marking her face. A Hermione who had endured, but at great cost. The older reflection looked at her with eyes heavy with knowledge Hermione did not yet have. "You are me," the older version said softly, her voice calm but filled with weight. "Or you could be. Do you want to see what you become?" Hermione's stomach twisted. This trial would not be one of riddles or combat. This would be a confrontation with time itself. The cavern felt colder as Hermione stood before the pool, the older reflection regarding her with weary eyes. The silence pressed in heavier than any weight on the staircase, heavier even than the flames of her double. For the first time, Hermione hesitated not because of fear, but because of what she might learn if she allowed this trial to unfold. The older Hermione tilted her head slightly, her expression calm yet threaded with sorrow. "You want to know what lies ahead. You want to know whether all this struggle leads somewhere. I can show you. But once you see, you cannot unsee." Hermione's grip tightened on her wand. A part of her longed to refuse. The prison twisted every trial, and surely this would be no different. Yet curiosity pulled at her. She had always craved knowledge, even when it cut. "Show me," she whispered. The pool rippled, its dark surface glowing faintly. Images began to form, blurry at first, then sharp as if the water had become a window into another life. Hermione saw herself standing in a ministry office, older, more confident, her robes marked with the insignia of authority. Papers littered the desk, and her voice carried power as she gave orders to subordinates. She had become a leader, respected and formidable. The older reflection's voice drifted across the water. "You rose high. You changed laws. You fought corruption. You became everything they once doubted you could be." Hermione's heart swelled briefly with pride. This was what she had dreamed of, using her mind, her fire, to make the world better. But as the image shifted, pride gave way to unease. Now she sat alone at a table in a quiet house, papers still scattered, candlelight flickering. No laughter echoed in the halls, no voices filled the silence. The book in her hands was her only companion. The reflection's voice deepened, heavy with meaning. But ambition came at a cost. You gave yourself to the work, and in doing so, pieces of you fell away. Friendships dimmed. Love slipped through your fingers. You told yourself it was sacrifice for the greater good. But in the end, who judged you but yourself? Hermione's throat tightened. The pool showed her hands older now, wrinkled, still clutching a quill. Tears blurred her sight as the scene shifted again. A graveyard. Harry's grave. Ron's grave. Names of others she loved etched in stone. She stood before them, shoulders bent not from age but from grief. "You outlived them," the reflection said softly. "And all your knowledge, all your victories, could not bring them back." Hermione fell to her knees at the pool's edge, shaking her head. "No, this is not real. This is just another trick." The reflection's eyes burned into hers. "It is a possibility. A path you could walk. You asked me to show you, and this is what I became. A woman who carried everything until nothing remained to carry her. Hermione's breaths came shallow, her chest aching. This was not fire or riddles, or even the crushing staircase. This was worse. This was the future she feared most, achieving everything but losing everyone. But then her book pulsed in her arm, warm against her skin. She looked down, and new words etched themselves into its pages. The future is not fixed. The prison shows what might be, not what must be. Hermione wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, her voice breaking but firm. You are not my fate. You are only a warning. The older reflection's expression softened, almost tender. Then learn from me. Carry your knowledge, but do not let it bury you. Hold power, but never at the expense of love. Remember that victory without joy is another kind of prison. The reflection reached a hand out of the water. For a heartbeat, Hermione thought she could take it, but when her fingers touched the surface, it rippled violently. The reflection dissolved, the water calming once more until only her own tired, determined face stared back at her. The silence lifted. The cavern walls shifted, revealing a narrow stone bridge leading away from the pool into deeper shadow. Hermione rose, still trembling but steadier now. She had seen what she could become if she forgot herself, if she lost sight of what mattered. And she would not let it happen. She crossed the bridge, her steps echoing through the cavern, the warmth of the book steady in her arms. The prison had shown her fire, perfection, knowledge, and now time itself. Each trial tried to define her, to box her into one version of herself. But she was more. She was all of them, and she was none of them. And she would keep walking until she proved it. The stone bridge stretched farther than Hermione expected. Each step echoed in the cavern, and the sound seemed to travel endlessly into the dark. She kept her wand raised, though its light reached only a few feet ahead. The air was damp, clinging to her skin, and she could hear the faint drip of water somewhere far below. She slowed, the silence pressing in again. The prison rarely allowed her to move without testing her. If she had learned anything, it was that stillness often meant something worse was waiting. Yet as she walked, nothing stirred. No reflection rose, no phantom voice taunted. For the first time since entering, she felt a pause. A moment that was hers alone. She lowered her wand slightly and leaned against the stone railing. The book in her arm pulsed faintly, warm and steady, as if reassuring her. She opened it, needing to see if it would guide her further. Words were already waiting. You chose to see what could be. You did not turn away, even when it hurt. That is strength, though it feels like pain. Strength is not only fire. It is not only knowledge. It is knowing what weight to carry and what to set down. Hermione's breath shuddered. The words resonated with what she had felt at the pool's edge. For so long, she had believed her strength was measured in what she could endure, how much she could hold, how fiercely she could fight. But here, the prison reminded her of something gentler and perhaps harder, choosing when to let go. Her eyes stung with tears she quickly brushed away. She could not crumble here. There were more trials to face, and she needed every piece of herself intact. The bridge ended abruptly at a carved archway. Unlike the jagged stone passages before, this arch was deliberate, its surface etched with runes that glowed faintly blue. She raised her wand, tracing the symbols with her eyes. They were old, older even than the runes she had studied at Hogwarts. She could not translate them all, but she caught fragments, words for silence, words for blood, words for truth. As she stepped through, a shift in the air told her she had crossed into another chamber. It was vast, circular, and unlike any place she had yet seen in the prison. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, but their flames made no sound, no crackle. The stone floor was smooth, marked with an intricate sigil that filled the entire space. At its center stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal lay another book. This one was different from hers. It was larger, bound in black leather that gleamed as if wet, the cover etched with runes like those on the archway. It seemed to drink in the torchlight rather than reflect it. Even from the threshold, Hermione felt a pull, as if the book itself called to her. Her own book pulsed uneasily, the glow in its pages dimming. New words appeared quickly, urgent. Do not trust it. It is not a gift. It is a test. Hermione tightened her grip. Of course it was. Every object in this place carried danger. Yet curiosity prickled at her. The black book might hold answers. Perhaps about the prison itself, perhaps about why she was here at all. She had walked through trial after trial without understanding the true purpose. If this book could tell her. She stepped forward cautiously. The sigil on the floor glowed faintly as she crossed its lines, though nothing rose to stop her. The silence was absolute, save for her footsteps. At the pedestal, she hesitated. The black book pulsed faintly, its runes shifting like they were alive. She reached out a trembling hand. Her fingers brushed the cover. The chamber shuddered. The torches flared, their light turning blood-red. The sigil beneath her feet ignited, threads of crimson racing outward. The book snapped open on its own, pages flipping violently until they stilled. Words appeared, seared into the parchment like fire branding flesh. Tell the truth or be unmade. Hermione's breath caught. The chamber was no longer just stone and flame. It was listening, waiting. The black book's pages glowed, and words formed again, sharper, harsher. Who are you when no one is watching? Hermione's pulse thundered. She had faced reflections, doubles, knowledge, and futures, but this was different. This trial would not show her. It would demand she show herself. She swallowed hard. There would be no clever riddle to solve, no puzzle to untangle. This was raw honesty, and the prison would not forgive lies. She closed her eyes briefly, clutching her own book close. Then she looked down at the burning words and prepared to answer. Hermione's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the glowing words etched into the black book. Who are you when no one is watching? It was such a simple question, but it cut deeper than the riddles or the flames or the weight of 1,000 steps. It was not about what she had achieved, what she knew, or what others saw in her. It was about the part of herself she rarely admitted, even to herself. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Instinct told her to answer quickly, to give something neat, polished, safe. The clever student, the loyal friend, the brave fighter. But the words in the book burned brighter, and the sigil beneath her feet hummed warningly, as if daring her to lie. She swallowed. Her throat was dry, but she forced the words out. I am afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid that everything I do will never be enough. The crimson threads in the sigil flared, then steadied. The book's pages turned, another line searing into existence. What do you want most beyond duty, beyond masks? Hermione froze. This was harder. Duty had always been her compass. She wanted to fight for justice, to make the world better, to stand with her friends. But beyond that, beyond what she was supposed to want, her hands trembled as she whispered, I want peace. A life where I do not always have to fight, where I can breathe, where I can love without fear that it will be torn away. The air trembled. The flames hissed. The sigil's glow dimmed to a softer red. But the book was not finished. New words seared themselves, merciless. What part of yourself do you hide, even from those you love? Hermione's breath caught. Her chest tightened, as though invisible fingers had wrapped around her ribs. She could feel the chamber pressing closer, waiting for her truth. Her first thought was to deny, to give some half-truth about pride or stubbornness. But her own book in her arm pulsed sharply, almost painfully, warning her. She bowed her head. I hide how lonely I am. Even when I am surrounded by people, I feel alone. I work so hard, I push so far, and I smile when I must. But sometimes I think no one really sees me, not all of me. And I'm afraid that if they did, they wouldn't want to. Her voice cracked on the last words. The chamber reacted immediately. The sigil flared so brightly she shielded her eyes, and the torches roared higher. But this time it was not a punishment. It was acknowledgement. The black book's pages turned again, slower now, and one final question formed. What truth will you carry out of here? Hermione steadied her breathing. She thought of the reflections, the scholar, the staircase, the pool. She thought of the loneliness she had admitted, the peace she longed for, the fear she had voiced. All of it was her, and she could not run from it. She lifted her head. That I am not perfect. That I do not have to be. That my strength is not in always knowing or always winning, but in still choosing to stand, even when I am afraid and flawed. That is who I am. The book slammed shut. The sigil's crimson light faded into nothing, leaving the chamber bathed once more in silence. The torches steadied, their flames white and calm. Hermione stood shaking, but lighter than before. Her chest still ached from the truths she had spoken, but it was the ache of something broken open, not broken down. She had admitted what she had long buried, and the prison had not unmade her. It had let her pass. Her book pulsed warmly, and new words appeared inside it. You have told the truth. Now you may walk forward without its shadow. The far wall of the chamber rumbled. A new passage opened, its archway glowing faintly with pale light. Hermione drew in a steady breath and stepped away from the pedestal. She would not look back at the black book. Its test was done. She crossed the chamber, her own book pressed close to her chest, and walked through the archway. The light beyond was colder, shifting like mist. She stepped into it, bracing herself, and the air around her changed again. She was somewhere new, somewhere she did not yet understand. The prison was not finished with her. Not yet. The mist coiled around Hermione as though it were alive, thick and damp, swallowing the sound of her footsteps. For a moment she could not see beyond an arm's length, and the loss of sight sent a shiver crawling up her spine. She raised her wand, whispering lumos, but the glow barely pierced the shifting haze. Her instinct was to press forward quickly, to escape the suffocating veil, yet something told her to slow down. The prison never placed her anywhere without purpose. The mist was not simply concealment, it was the trial itself. She forced her breathing steady and walked cautiously, her wand held high. The mist seemed to swirl in patterns, drawing back and folding in again, as though it responded to her movement. It was silent except for the faint hiss of her own breath. Then she heard it. A whisper. Hermione. Her blood ran cold. The voice was achingly familiar. She spun, trying to locate it, but the mist was impenetrable. Hermione, help me. This time the voice was clearer. It was Harry's. Her chest constricted. She took a step forward, heart hammering. Harry? Where are you? No answer, only the shifting mist. Then another whisper, softer but no less piercing. Don't leave me behind. Ron. Hermione's throat closed. She clutched her wand tighter, her eyes scanning the whiteness. Logic warned her this was another trap. The prison knew her heart, her fears, her bonds. It was using their voices against her. Yet even knowing that, the sound of them, pleading, lost, cut her deeply. More voices followed, overlapping, weaving through the mist like a chorus. Ginny, Neville, Luna, her parents. Each voice called her name, each one desperate, each one needing. Hermione stopped walking. If she chased one, she knew she would lose herself. That was the prison's design. The mist would pull her apart by her own love for others, scattering her in every direction until nothing remained. Her book pulsed faintly in her arm, its warmth fighting against the chill of the mist. She opened it with trembling fingers. Words shimmered into being. Do not chase voices. Find your own. She shut her eyes, the mist pressing against her skin, the voices echoing painfully. She wanted to run to all of them, to help them all, but she forced herself to take a steady breath. My name is Hermione Granger, she said aloud, her voice shaking but firm. I am not lost. The mist recoiled slightly, rippling like disturbed water. The voices faltered. She took another step, speaking louder. I hear you, but you are not real. You are not Harry. You are not Ron. You are not my parents. You are only shadows. The chorus of whispers shifted, becoming harsher, more urgent, as if angered by her resistance. The mist thickened, and the voices screamed her name in unison. But Hermione gritted her teeth, pressing forward. I know who I am, she said, her voice steadying. And I will not be broken by your lies. Her book blazed with warmth, so strong she felt it in her chest, and the mist shuddered. A thin path of clear air opened before her, narrow but solid. She stepped onto it without hesitation, ignoring the voices still clawing at her ears. With every step she took, the whispers weakened, growing fainter, until finally they faded into silence. The mist thinned, unraveling around her. When she emerged, she found herself in a small chamber, bare stone walls enclosing her. For once, there was no pedestal, no sigil, no test waiting. Just a single wooden door across the room. Hermione exhaled shakily. The mist trial had not tested her knowledge or her strength. It had tested her heart, her need to protect, her vulnerability to those she loved. And she had not broken. She approached the door slowly, placing her hand against the worn wood. Her book pulsed one last time before she pushed it open. Beyond was a staircase spiraling upward, disappearing into darkness. She gripped the railing, steeling herself. The prison was not done, but neither was she. Hermione began to climb. The staircase rose steeply, vanishing into the dark above. Hermione placed one foot on the first step and paused. The air was still, heavy, carrying the faint scent of dust and stone. It reminded her of the endless staircase she had once climbed, the one that had nearly crushed her beneath its weight. For a moment, fear flickered through her chest. Was this the same trial again, or something worse? She tightened her grip on her wand and her book, drawing in a steady breath. "I've done this before," she whispered to herself. "If it is another staircase, I will climb it." She began to ascend. At first, the climb was ordinary, steps of stone, the sound of her own breathing, the echo of her footfalls. But soon she noticed the change. With each step upward, the staircase beneath her dissolved into nothingness. When she glanced back, the steps were gone, leaving only a void of black stretching endlessly below. There would be no going back. Her chest tightened. The prison was making sure she understood. This was not a test of endurance, but of commitment. Every step she took was irreversible. She kept climbing. The higher she went, the stranger the air became. Whispers threaded through it, faint at first, then stronger, as if the mist voices had followed her here. But these whispers were not of friends or family. They were her own. "I should have studied harder. I should have been braver. I should have been enough." Each self-condemning thought echoed around her, words she had spoken only in the quiet of her own mind. The staircase amplified them, hurled them back at her until they seemed to come from every direction. Hermione faltered, her hand tightening painfully around the railing. She had endured doubts all her life, but hearing them spoken aloud, unrelenting, was almost unbearable. She wanted to clap her hands over her ears, but the voices were inside her head as much as around her. Her book pulsed weakly, as though reminding her it was still there. She forced herself to open it as she climbed. The words shimmered slowly into being. "Doubt follows all who walk forward. To climb is not to silence it, but to choose which voice you answer." Hermione stopped, breathing hard, and let the meaning sink in. The staircase wasn't demanding she erase her doubts. It was forcing her to confront the truth. She had always carried them. She always would. But she didn't have to let them rule her. She lifted her chin. "I hear you," she said aloud, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier. "I hear every doubt. But I will not stop. You will not decide for me." The voices rose to a roar, furious at her defiance, but as she continued to climb, step after step, they began to thin. Not disappear entirely, never disappear, but soften, receding into the background. The darkness above broke at last. A faint light shimmered, and Hermione quickened her pace, her legs burning, her chest heaving. The final steps carried her into a new chamber. It was vast and silent, circular like the Chamber of Truth, but here the walls were mirrors. Dozens of them, each one reflecting not just her body, but distorted fragments of herself. Some mirrors showed her younger, small and uncertain. Others showed her older, hardened and cold. Still others warped her entirely, stretching her face into grotesque shapes, twisting her form into things unrecognizable. At the very center of the chamber, one mirror stood apart. Taller, grander, its surface black and unreflective. Hermione's stomach dropped. She knew this was no ordinary mirror. This was the true trial waiting for her at the top of the staircase. She tightened her grip on her book, her breath slow and steady. Whatever waited inside that dark surface, she would face it. And she stepped toward the center of the chamber. Hermione stood before the black mirror, her breath shallow, her reflection absent in its void-like surface. Unlike the other mirrors, this one did not distort, did not mock, did not tempt. It simply waited, silent and impenetrable. Her hand trembled as she reached out, fingers brushing the cold glass. The surface rippled outward like water disturbed by a pebble. And slowly, something began to form. Not a twisted monster. Not a hardened future self. Not even the timid girl she once was. It was her. But not in the way she expected. The mirror showed Hermione standing exactly as she was, clutching the book, wand in hand. Yet around her there was no prison. No Hogwarts. No ministry. No world at all. Just endless white stretching in every direction. And she stood utterly alone. Her heart clenched. At first, she thought it was another trick, a cruel echo of her fear of loneliness. But the longer she stared, the more she realized it was different. This was not punishment. It was truth. The Hermione in the mirror lifted her head and met her gaze. Her lips moved, though no sound came at first. Then, faintly, her voice reached Hermione, clear as if spoken in her ear. "You are the constant." Hermione's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" she whispered aloud. The reflection repeated, firmer this time. "You are the constant. In every path, in every choice you remain. The prison tests you because you are the axis. You are the truth that cannot be unmade." Hermione's chest tightened. She thought of all the trials, the double who tried to burn her, the scholar who questioned her hunger for knowledge, the staircase that weighed her down, the pool that showed her age and grief, the voices in the mist. Each had tried to define her by one piece of herself. And she had fought to prove she was not just one fragment, but the whole. Now the mirror confirmed it. Her greatest truth was not perfection, not knowledge, not power. It was her persistence, her ability to endure, to adapt, to continue forward even when everything else fell away. But as the reflection held her gaze, Hermione saw something else. A shadow behind her mirror self, faint but undeniable. It looked like chains. Her throat tightened. "What are those?" she demanded. The reflection's eyes softened, though the chains behind her remained. "Even the constant can be bound. Fear, guilt, duty, they will try to chain you, to drag you down. If you accept them blindly, they will become your prison." Hermione staggered back a step. The prison was not only around her. It was inside her. The mirror rippled again, and her reflection extended a hand, palm upward, as if offering her a choice. "Break them," the reflection whispered. Hermione's grip on her wand tightened. She stared at the image of the chains, at the possibility that they might bind her forever if she failed. Her heart pounded, but she lifted her wand toward the mirror. "No more chains," she said, her voice steady. The mirror cracked. Once, twice, then shattering in a cascade of soundless glass. The pieces dissolved into light, scattering into the chamber until nothing remained but empty space. Hermione lowered her wand, her chest heaving, her knees weak. The mirrors along the walls were gone. The black mirror was gone. Only she remained. Her book pulsed warmly in her arms, and a single line appeared. "You have faced yourself. You may now face the heart of the prison." Hermione's breath caught. She turned slowly. At the far end of the chamber, a door had appeared. Tall, ancient, its surface carved with runes older than any she had seen. Beyond it lay what she had been walking toward all along. The heart. She stepped forward, every part of her braced. The prison had stripped her, tested her, broken her, and rebuilt her. But now it would show her why. And she was ready to find out. Hermione stood before the ancient door, the faint glow of the runes casting shifting shadows across her face. She hesitated, not out of fear, but from a deep awareness of what this threshold meant. Every chamber before had been a piece of her, a test of identity, resilience, and truth. But this door, this was not a test. This was a revelation waiting to unfold. She pressed her palm against the cool stone. The runes pulsed beneath her skin, as though recognizing her touch. The book in her arm hummed, the words on its page writing themselves without her even opening it. The heart is not given. It is earned. Step with clarity, for all that you are will follow. She exhaled slowly, letting her nerves settle. In this moment, she thought of everything behind her. The timid girl she once was, clutching books too tightly to notice friendship until it stood before her. The cold, hardened woman she might have become had she abandoned compassion. The monstrous shadows that whispered of power and cruelty. She had faced them all, and she had not faltered. Her hand slid from the door, and she straightened her shoulders. "I am ready." The runes flared, and the door swung open soundlessly, revealing not a chamber, but a vast expanse of shifting light. It was as though the sky had been drawn inside, filled with rolling auroras that pulsed and swirled in endless colors. The floor was smooth and reflective, like glass, mirroring the cosmos above. Hermione stepped inside, her footsteps echoing softly. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air did not choke her. There was no pressure, no stench of fear or shadow. It was calm, almost serene. But in the center of the vast space stood a pedestal, carved from the same stone as the door, runes spiraling upward in intricate designs. And upon it lay something so simple it startled her. A single candle, unlit. Hermione approached cautiously, her wand tight in her grasp. She had expected something grander, darker perhaps. A monstrous guardian, or a puzzle so complex it would push her to her limits. But here was only a candle. Its wax was plain, its wick unburned. Yet she felt the weight of it pressing against her chest. Her book pulsed again, and the words flowed. The heart of the prison is choice. To kindle or to leave dark. To carry light or to guard shadow. What burns will bind you. What remains unlit will define you. Hermione's throat went dry. This was no mere trial. It was finality. She stared at the candle, every thought in her mind surging. If she lit it, what would happen? Would she free herself? Or would she bind herself forever to the prison's truth? If she left it dark, would she preserve herself, or remain trapped here with no way forward? Her thoughts turned unbidden to Harry and Ron. To Ginny, to her parents. To the friends she had lost, the sacrifices made, the victories paid for with blood. Every choice she had ever made rippled outward, shaping the lives of others. This was no different. She raised her wand, whispering, "Lumos." The tip glowed, casting a soft beam of light against the reflective floor. It shimmered like starlight across the endless sky above. She lowered it toward the wick, her hand trembling. But she stopped just before the light touched. Her chest tightened. Was this truly about fire, or was it about acceptance? She closed her eyes, taking in the silence. And in that silence, she heard it again, the faintest whisper, the echo of her reflection's words. "You are the constant." Her breath steadied. She opened her eyes and lowered her wand completely. Instead, she reached forward with her free hand, placing her fingers gently against the unlit wick. She did not cast a spell. She did not force the light. She simply accepted the candle as it was. And in that acceptance, it ignited. The flame was not like ordinary fire. It burned gold and silver, spreading warmth through the vast chamber. The auroras above flared brighter and brighter, until the whole space was bathed in radiance. Hermione staggered back, shielding her eyes, but the light did not burn. It embraced. Her book glowed so strongly it was almost impossible to hold. She opened it without meaning to, and a single phrase seared itself into her mind. The heart answers not what you do, but what you are. The flame is you, and you are free. The chamber trembled. The pedestal cracked. The auroras swirled faster, collapsing inward as though the prison itself was folding away. Hermione gasped, clutching her book tightly as the floor gave way beneath her feet. The light consumed her, pulling her into its center, until there was no chamber, no prison, only brilliance. And then silence. Hermione drifted in the engulfing light, weightless, as though her body had dissolved into the brilliance around her. She could not feel the floor beneath her feet, nor the heaviness of the book clutched to her chest. For a moment, there was no separation between herself and the radiance. She was part of it, and it was part of her. She expected silence, but instead came a low hum, like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. It reverberated through her, anchoring her even as the world she had known fell away. Each pulse seemed to whisper something familiar, though she could not yet catch the words. She opened her eyes, or perhaps she had never closed them, and found herself standing in a place she could barely comprehend. The brilliance softened, forming vague shapes, outlines of rooms, corridors, and faces. They flickered in and out, as though painted onto the light itself. Hermione turned slowly, her breath catching. She saw flashes of her past, the library at Hogwarts, warm candlelight flickering on wooden tables. The common room, the Gryffindor fire crackling as Harry and Ron laughed beside her. Her parents smiling as they sat across the kitchen table. Moments gone, yet alive in the glow. But then came images she did not recognize. She saw herself older, standing in front of students in a classroom, chalk in hand as though teaching. She saw herself with a child cradled in her arms, smiling down with a tenderness that pulled at her heart. She saw battles she had never fought, conversations she had never had, triumphs and mistakes that belonged to versions of her she had not lived. Her chest tightened. These aren't all mine," she whispered. The hum deepened, the light swirling into patterns. And then from the brilliance a voice rose, not separate from her, but within her. "They are all yours. Every choice unmade. every path untaken. The prison is not built of walls. It is built of possibility. Hermione's knees nearly gave way. The sheer scope of what she was being shown pressed against her mind, threatening to overwhelm her. All the lives she might have lived, all the roads she might have walked, they were infinite, stretching beyond what her mind could contain. "But why show me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The hum softened, and the light coiled inward, forming a shape before her. Slowly, it became a figure, a silhouette of herself, woven entirely of the radiance. The figure stepped closer, its voice calm, resonant, undeniable. "Because you asked what was real. Because you questioned if your years were dream or truth. And now you see they are both. Every choice creates its world. You walk one, but the others remain, alive in possibility." Hermione's breath hitched. She thought back to when she had woken in her parents' home, her memories of Hogwarts blurred and fragile. Was it a dream? Was it her life? Or was it both, threads of possibility that the prison was forcing her to confront? The glowing Hermione extended her hand, palm up. "You are the constant. No matter the path, no matter the dream, you remain you. That is your truth." Hermione's eyes stung with sudden tears. All this time, she had fought to prove that her memories were real, that her struggles mattered, that she had not simply imagined her victories. But perhaps it was not about proving one life over the other. Perhaps it was about accepting that both carried meaning, because she herself was the thread that tied them. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Then if I accept this, am I free?" The glowing figure tilted its head, its expression a mirror of her own determination. "Freedom is not release. Freedom is choice. You must choose where to wake." The chamber of light trembled, the brilliance folding into two distinct paths behind the figure. On one side, Hermione glimpsed the world of her parents' home, ordinary and untouched by magic. On the other, she saw Hogwarts, vibrant and dangerous, filled with the faces she loved and feared losing. Her heart hammered. The choice loomed before her, heavier than any she had faced in the prison. This was no test of courage or intellect. It was the choice of her life, and she had only a moment to decide. Hermione stood frozen between the two paths, her breath quickening as the brilliance pulsed around her like a living heartbeat. On her left, she saw the familiar comfort of her parents' world. A kitchen table bathed in morning light, her mother humming as she brewed tea, her father adjusting his glasses as he read the newspaper. A life of stability. A life without curses, without loss, without the shadow of war. A life where she could live without fear. On her right, Hogwarts shimmered in the glow of memory and possibility. The castle towers, majestic and unyielding. The Gryffindor common room, warm with firelight and the sound of laughter. Harry's determined eyes, Ron's lopsided grin, Ginny's fierce spirit. It was a world of love and friendship, but also of danger and sacrifice. A place where she had fought, struggled, and bled. But it was also where she had truly come alive. Her chest ached. She wanted both. She wanted the quiet safety of her parents' home and the blazing fire of magic and battle. But the glowing figure's words echoed in her mind. Freedom is not release. Freedom is choice. She clutched her book tightly, as though it might provide the answer. Words began to etch themselves onto the pages without her command. One path spares you. One path defines you. Neither is wrong. Both are yours. But only one will wake with you. Her throat tightened. The truth of it pressed against her ribs like a weight. She thought of her parents, how much she had already taken from them, how many memories she had stolen and restored, how much danger her existence had dragged into their quiet lives. If she chose their world, she could protect them. She could give them peace. But then she thought of Harry, of Ron, of every friend who had stood beside her when the world threatened to collapse. She thought of the battles they had faced, the victories they had clawed from the jaws of despair. If she abandoned that world, would it vanish? Would those lives, those struggles, mean nothing? Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I cannot decide," she whispered. "How do I choose between the people I love?" The glowing figure, herself, stepped closer, eyes filled with quiet understanding. "You do not choose who you love. You choose who you walk beside." Hermione's knees nearly buckled. Her mind raced through every detail, every memory. She imagined living without magic, settling into a life of books and quiet academia, always wondering if the friendships she remembered had been illusions. and she imagined living with magic, surrounded by her friends but forever aware of the danger, of the price such a life demanded. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She was so close to deciding, but her heart pulled in both directions, splitting her apart. The light around her dimmed slightly, as though the prison itself leaned in, waiting, demanding resolution. The figure of light extended both hands now, one toward each path. "You are the constant," the voice reminded her again, steady as stone. "The world you wake to will shape itself around you. But you must choose." Hermione wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve. Her chest felt like it might collapse under the weight of the decision. She turned her gaze first to her parents' world, then to Hogwarts. The ache inside her grew unbearable. She whispered, "I am not ready." And the chamber trembled violently. The figure of light flickered, its form breaking like shattered glass. The two paths pulsed brighter, threatening to collapse into one another. Hermione staggered, clutching her book, her heart hammering as the brilliance closed in. Her indecision had fractured the prison itself. And now, it seemed, she might lose both worlds if she did not decide now. The light cracked like thunder, splitting the chamber apart. Hermione staggered backward, the reflective floor beneath her feet breaking into jagged shards of brilliance. Each fragment still held glimpses of her choices, her parents' faces, Harry's determined eyes, the warmth of home, the fire of friendship. But they were slipping away, falling into the abyss that yawned below. "No!" Hermione cried, clutching her book tighter. Her wand trembled in her hand, though no spell seemed strong enough to hold the worlds together. She had delayed too long. The prison would not wait forever. The glowing figure, her reflection of light, flickered violently, its face contorting as cracks spread through its radiant form. "Choose," it urged, its voice fractured like broken glass. "If you do not, both will be lost." Hermione's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might shatter her ribs. She turned frantically between the two paths, her breath ragged. Safety and family. Friendship and struggle. Love and war. How could she decide when both were carved so deeply into her soul? Her knees buckled. She dropped to the splintering floor, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot sacrifice one world for the other," she whispered hoarsely. "Both matter. Both are real to me." The shards around her trembled, falling faster now, the paths collapsing into the void. But as Hermione's words echoed through the chamber, something shifted. The light stilled just for a moment. The figure of radiance steadied, its cracks halting. "You speak of impossibility," it said softly, its voice steadier than before. "But the constant does not choose between what is real. The constant binds." Hermione froze. The words sank into her like a key sliding into a lock. Her indecision had not been weakness. It had been truth. She did not want one life at the cost of the other, because both were part of her. Her book blazed suddenly, words etching themselves so fiercely she could barely see through the glow. "The prison does not demand sacrifice. It demands acceptance. Not this world or that, but both. Dream and reality together." Hermione gasped, her mind spinning. Was it possible? Could she carry both lives, both truths, without losing herself? The chamber roared around her, the collapsing light surging upward like a storm. Hermione rose to her feet, lifting her wand. "I will not choose between them," she said firmly, her voice shaking but unbroken. "I accept them both. I am Hermione Granger of every path, every choice, every world. That is my truth." The chamber erupted. The light shattered, not into void, but into brilliance that consumed everything. The two paths surged forward, colliding not in destruction but in union. Hermione shielded her eyes as the brilliance enveloped her, not tearing her apart but fusing around her, filling her until she could no longer tell where she ended and the light began. The glowing figure smiled through its fractures, its voice a final whisper in her mind. "The constant does not choose one world. The constant becomes the bridge." Then it vanished and the world went silent. Hermione felt herself falling, weightless again. But this time she was not afraid. She clutched her book to her chest, closed her eyes, and let the light carry her into whatever lay beyond. Hermione floated in the silence after the collapse, her body suspended as though in the pause between heartbeats. The brilliance that had consumed the chamber no longer burned her eyes, but neither did it fade. It was softer now, like morning light filtering through curtains, wrapping her in warmth. Her senses began to return, piece by piece. The rush of her own breath. The faint thrum of her pulse in her ears. The feel of her fingers pressed tightly against the book at her chest. She could not tell if she was standing, lying down, or drifting through air, but she no longer felt weightless. Instead, she felt tethered, anchored to something solid, something real. Fragments of sound teased her awareness. Laughter. Pages turning. A kettle whistling in the distance. The echoes of footsteps in stone corridors. The familiar creak of a chair against wood. The sounds overlapped, blurred, as though two worlds were trying to speak at once. Her eyes flickered open, but vision came in fragments too. One moment she saw the warm glow of her parents' kitchen, sunlight spilling across a table scattered with mugs and books. The next, she saw the sweeping staircases of Hogwarts, portraits shifting on the walls, students bustling past with voices alive with chatter. The images flickered back and forth, overlapping until her mind throbbed from the strain. She shut her eyes again, pressing her forehead against her arm. No, I accepted them both," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They cannot tear apart. They must be one." The book in her arms pulsed, steady and calm, as though answering her panic. Her breath slowed with it, her racing thoughts steadying into rhythm. And then the words appeared in her mind, not written, but spoken directly from the book itself. "Do not force them apart. Let them weave. The bridge does not stand between. It binds." Hermione's trembling stilled. She let the fragments swirl together, no longer resisting when the images overlapped. The smell of parchment and ink mingled with the scent of her mother's tea. The crackle of the Gryffindor fire blended with the hum of her father's radio. And slowly, impossibly, the chaos began to knit itself into something whole. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself sitting upright in bed. The quilt over her legs was her mother's work, patterned and faded from years of use. Yet at the foot of the bed sat her trunk, worn with travel, the Hogwarts crest gleaming faintly on its brass clasp. Hermione's breath caught. She turned her head. On the desk by the window lay her mother's vase of daisies, right beside a stack of parchment covered in spell work. Her father's old coat hung on the door, but over it rested her Gryffindor scarf. Her heart pounded wildly. Both worlds had bled into one, stitched together into something entirely new. The book in her lap glowed faintly, though no words wrote themselves now. She realized it no longer needed to. Its presence alone was enough. Hermione's throat tightened. "So this is it," she whispered. "Not one life or the other, but both." The room seemed to hum in quiet agreement. She could still hear the faint laughter of her friends, distant but near enough to reach. And from the kitchen below, the sound of her mother's footsteps and the clink of dishes grounded her in a home that was just as real. She pressed the book to her chest and closed her eyes, tears slipping free, not of sorrow, but of relief. She had not lost one world to keep the other. She had found a way to carry both. For the first time since waking in her parents' house, Hermione truly believed she was free. Hermione woke early the next morning, the soft light of dawn spilling across her quilt. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the blend of sounds that confirmed what she had seen last night was not a fleeting dream. The faint tick of her father's old clock on the wall mingled with the rustle of parchment from her desk, where quills lay ready beside an open ink bottle. Both belonged here. Both were part of her world now. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet pressing against the wooden floor. Her eyes moved carefully around the room, searching for cracks, for proof that the fusion of lives might be unstable. But everything seemed whole. The daisies her mother had arranged in the vase had not wilted, and beside them her spell diagrams glowed faintly with the last trace of enchanted ink. The Gryffindor scarf draped over her father's coat looked as though it had always been there. Hermione's heart thudded. The prison had told her she was the bridge. If that was true, then this world was the thread she had woven by refusing to choose. But she could not know its limits until she tested them. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling with anticipation, and moved down the stairs. The smell of toast drifted from the kitchen, warm and comforting. Her mother hummed softly as she worked by the stove, while her father sat at the table, paper in hand. It was achingly familiar, perfectly ordinary. "Hermione, you're up early," her mother said with a smile, glancing over her shoulder. "Your father's made tea." Hermione opened her mouth to reply, but then she froze. At the far end of the kitchen table sat a stack of parchment. Parchment that definitely had not belonged in this world before. She stepped closer and her breath caught. The top page was a letter, sealed with the crest of Hogwarts. Her father adjusted his glasses, glanced at her, and chuckled. "Looks like your school still finds a way to keep you busy, even during the holidays." Hermione's hand shook as she reached for the letter. It was real. She felt the wax seal, smelled the parchment, knew in her bones that this belonged. Hogwarts was not fading. It existed here, alongside everything else. She broke the seal with careful fingers. The handwriting inside was unmistakable. "Hermione, we hope you are well. Harry says he has news and insists you must come to see him before term begins. Ron agrees, though you know how he is. Please come soon. We need you." It was signed simply, Ginny. Hermione's heart clenched so tightly it hurt. She folded the letter quickly, pressing it to her chest. Her parents were watching her, both of them with calm expressions, as though nothing about this struck them as strange. To them, it was natural that she lived between these worlds. She tested it further. "Mom, Dad," she said carefully, Do you remember when I left for Hogwarts? Really remember?" Her mother turned, her brow furrowed slightly. "Of course we do. You were so excited, though you tried to hide it. I remember the way you gripped your books on the platform." Her father chuckled softly. "And you scolded me for nearly forgetting your trunk. As though I'd ever let you miss the train." Hermione's breath caught. They remembered. Not just the vague outlines she had feared losing, but true details, vivid and whole. The prison had not merely given her back one life. It had woven both into her reality, and those she loved had accepted it as if it had always been true. Her knees went weak, and she gripped the edge of the table. Her mother frowned gently. "Are you all right, dear?" Hermione forced a small smile, though tears pricked her eyes. "Yes, I'm fine. More than fine." She sat down, her fingers brushing over the letter again. She had to see Harry, Ron, Ginny, all of them. She had to know if they, too, carried this woven truth. But for the first time since waking, Hermione felt certain of one thing. She was not trapped anymore. She was living in the world she had chosen to create, the world she had refused to sacrifice. And she was ready to see what it meant. Hermione packed quickly after breakfast, her hands moving with purpose though her mind raced ahead. The letter from Ginny still sat on her desk, folded neatly, but the words within burned in her thoughts. "Harry says he has news." That meant urgency. That meant something bigger than the ordinary chaos of preparing for term. She placed her wand in her bag, though it was already tucked safely in her pocket, and then hesitated. For so long, she had feared losing one half of herself, either the daughter of Muggle parents or the witch who had fought beside Harry. But as she looked around her room, the contradiction no longer existed. Her textbooks leaned beside her father's old novels. A stack of parchment lay on her desk next to the fountain pen her mother had gifted her. There was no fracture now, only continuity. Her father called up the stairs. "Train's at 10, isn't it?" Hermione paused, startled. "Yes," she called back, voice uncertain. She had not even told them when she planned to leave. Yet somehow they knew. Another sign the weaving of her two lives was no fragile illusion, but something whole, reshaped around her. She descended the stairs with her trunk hovering just behind her. Her parents stood in the foyer, both smiling with that mix of pride and quiet sadness she had seen every September when she left for school. Her mother fussed with her coat, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Stay safe, darling. And write when you can," she said warmly. "I will," Hermione whispered. Her throat felt tight, but she forced herself to hold steady. She wanted to ask them if they understood what had changed, if they knew their lives had been rewoven with magic. But their eyes told her the truth. Whether or not they knew, they accepted it fully. With a deep breath, she stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, the sun low on the horizon. She raised her wand, summoned the night bus with a loud bang, and soon she was rattling through the streets, her trunk sliding dangerously with every turn. Yet instead of clinging in fear, she found herself smiling faintly. The absurdity of this magical world had always felt precarious before, as if it might dissolve if she questioned it too much. Now it felt anchored, as real as the steady heartbeat in her chest. She arrived at the leaky cauldron, the familiar doorway between worlds. Pushing through, she entered Diagon Alley, and her breath caught again. It was alive in a way she had never seen before. Witches and wizards bustled past with parchment lists and school robes. Shopkeepers called out from their stalls, owls swooped above. And yet, threaded among them were traces of the other world. She glimpsed a man in a Muggle business suit holding his child's hand, the child carrying a cauldron that seemed to belong to both worlds at once. She blinked hard, but it was not an illusion. The weaving extended beyond her. At the far end of the street, outside Flourish and Blots, she saw them. Harry stood with his familiar awkward posture, glasses sliding down his nose, but his expression lit when he saw her. Ron stood beside him, shifting from foot to foot, and Ginny leaned casually against the shop wall, arms crossed but her grin unmistakable. Hermione broke into a run before she could stop herself. She collided with Harry in a hug, one so fierce it startled him. "Blimey," Ron muttered, though his ears went red. "You'd think she hadn't seen us in years." Hermione pulled back, her eyes searching Harry's face. "You're real," she whispered. Harry blinked. "Of course I'm real. Are you all right?" Hermione turned quickly to Ginny. "The letter, did you mean it? You really needed me." Ginny's smile faded, replaced with a solemn nod. "Yes. Something's happening, Hermione. And it's not just Hogwarts. It's everywhere." Hermione felt her stomach twist, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Do you remember? Do you know what's changed?" The three exchanged glances, and Hermione's breath caught. Harry pushed his glasses higher, his brow furrowing. "We've all had dreams lately. Strange ones. Memories that don't fit. Sometimes I wake up and swear I've lived a different life. Sometimes Ron says the same." Ron scowled, but his voice was quiet. "It's not dreams, is it? It's real. Something's different. I can feel it." Hermione's heart raced. They knew. Not completely, not as she did, but enough to sense the weaving. She was not alone in this truth. Ginny stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Harry's right. We're caught between something, and you're at the center of it. We need to understand what's happening. And we think Hogwarts might hold the answers." Hermione looked between them, her chest swelling with a mix of fear and fierce relief. She was not carrying this burden in silence anymore. They remembered enough to stand beside her. She gripped Harry's hand tightly. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever this is, we'll find the truth." For the first time since waking in her old bed, Hermione felt a surge of certainty. This world was not just a fragile dream. It was alive, changing, and demanding answers. And she, with her friends beside her, was ready to face whatever came next. The four of them decided not to linger in Diagon Alley longer than necessary. Hermione could see the tension on Harry's face, the way his eyes kept scanning the street as though he expected something, or someone, to appear. Even Ron was quieter than usual, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Ginny, though steady, kept her wand close, her sharp gaze flicking to every sound. They boarded the train at King's Cross, and Hermione's chest tightened as she passed through the barrier at platform 9 3/4. The scarlet engine waited, steam curling around the tracks. Families bustled, voices rising above the noise, but Hermione noticed something odd. Among the witches and wizards, there were unmistakably Muggle families as well, watching their children with equal measures of pride and worry. Some clutched cameras, others whispered nervously, but none seemed surprised to be here. Hermione slowed, her breath catching. This had never been part of her Hogwarts life. Yet now it blended seamlessly, the Muggle and magical parents standing side by side, as if it had always been this way. "See," Ron muttered beside her, noticing her expression. "It's not just us. Everything's off." Harry gave a small nod. "It feels like both worlds are bleeding together. And it's stronger than when we left school last term." Ginny's hand brushed Hermione's arm. "Let's get on the train. We can talk properly there." They found an empty compartment near the middle of the train. Hermione sat opposite Harry, her mind burning with questions. She had wanted to know if Hogwarts itself had been reshaped, and already she had her answer. But she needed to know the rest, the reason Harry had insisted she come. Harry leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I didn't want to write it in the letter. Too dangerous. But you should know, strange things have been happening. Not just dreams. Real things." Hermione frowned. "Like what?" Harry hesitated, then said quietly, People are coming back. Ron shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the window. Not just anyone, either. People we knew. People who shouldn't be here anymore. Hermione's breath caught. You mean? Sirius, Harry interrupted. His voice cracked slightly, though he kept his gaze steady. I saw him. Not a ghost, not a memory. He was there in Grimmauld Place. Alive. He knew me. Hermione's thoughts raced so quickly she felt dizzy. Sirius Black had fallen beyond the veil. No spell, no magic she knew could undo that. Yet if the weaving of her two lives could bring back her parents' memories and blend realities, then perhaps the veil itself was no longer a boundary. Harry continued, his voice low but fierce. It's not just him. Others too. People thought gone are walking again. Some of them don't even realize anything's strange. They think they've been here the whole time. Ginny's expression was grim. And if that's happening in London, it's bound to be happening everywhere. The line between life and death is breaking. Hermione pressed her hands against her knees, her pulse hammering. It's the weaving, she whispered. When I chose not to give up one life, when I refused to let the prison take one reality, I pulled them together. But it wasn't neat. It wasn't clean. The boundaries between everything life, death, magic, non-magic, they're unraveling. The compartment fell silent, the sound of the train rumbling beneath them filling the space. Ron finally broke it. So what do we do? Just fix reality? Sounds easy enough. His sarcasm fell flat, his voice tight with unease. Hermione lifted her head, determination flashing in her eyes. We start at Hogwarts. If the weaving is strongest anywhere, it will be there. The castle has always been more than just stone. It holds memories, secrets, power. If anything can help us understand what's happening, it's Hogwarts. Harry gave a firm nod. Then that's where we'll begin. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. The train whistled, gathering speed as it carried them north. Hermione pressed her forehead lightly against the glass, watching the countryside blur past. Fields stretched endlessly, but even they seemed different. She thought she saw a glimmer of street lamps where no road should be, the faint hum of electricity mingling with the old wards she knew lay over the land. This was no longer the world she had once dreamed. It was something new, something unstable, and she was both its cause and its guardian. She knew one thing for certain as the train hurtled forward. Hogwarts would not be the same place they had once known. And whatever waited for them there might hold the answer to why the dead were walking again. The train sped northward, the countryside blurring past in waves of green and gold. Inside their compartment, silence lingered, broken only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional distant shout of students in the corridors. Yet beneath that silence pulsed a tension none of them could name. Hermione kept glancing at Harry, watching the way his hand rested near his wand, fingers twitching as though expecting trouble at any moment. Ron shifted constantly in his seat, his legs jiggling, his eyes darting from the window to the door. Ginny sat almost unnaturally still, her gaze sharp, her jaw tight. Hermione opened her mouth to say something, anything to break the tension, when the lights flickered. It was brief, a strange dimming as though a shadow had passed through the entire train. But Hermione's breath hitched. That had never happened before. Harry sat straighter. Did you see that? Before anyone could answer, the train shuddered violently. Students screamed down the corridor. Hermione felt her stomach drop as the compartment lurched, the glass rattling in the frames. She gripped the edge of her seat to keep steady. The lights flickered again, longer this time, before plunging the compartment into near darkness. Only the faint glow of Hermione's wand, hastily lit with a whispered lumos, pierced the gloom. Something's wrong, Ginny said, her voice steady but low. The train slowed suddenly, grinding against the tracks, until it screeched to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Silence fell, heavy and unnatural. The kind of silence that makes the hair on the back of the neck rise. Ron swallowed hard. Not Dementors again. Please not Dementors. Hermione shook her head. No. This feels different. Footsteps echoed outside the compartment. Slow. Deliberate. They weren't the hurried patter of students, nor the firm stride of the trolley witch. They were heavier, dragging, like someone who hadn't walked in years. Harry stood, wand raised, moving cautiously toward the door. The footsteps grew louder until they stopped just outside. The handle rattled. Hermione's chest tightened. She aimed her wand. Ron and Ginny did the same. The door slid open with a screech. A figure stood there, silhouetted in the faint light from the corridor. Tall, thin, his robes frayed at the edges, his hair wild and unkempt. Hermione's heart stopped. She knew that face. Professor Lupin. He looked at them with tired eyes, the same warm eyes she remembered from her third year, though shadowed with something older, heavier. His voice, when he spoke, was rough, as though pulled from a long silence. "Hello," he said quietly. "I was told I might find you here." Hermione's hand trembled. "But you," she couldn't finish the sentence. He had died in the Battle of Hogwarts. She had seen it with her own eyes. Harry's wand hand faltered. His voice was barely a whisper. "Professor." Lupin stepped inside the compartment, closing the door behind him. His expression softened when he looked at Harry. "It's me. I don't know how, but it's me." Hermione's mind spun. The weaving. The unraveling. The way boundaries were collapsing. Sirius had returned. Now Lupin stood before them. This was no longer coincidence. Ron muttered under his breath. Brilliant. Dead people dropping by trains now. What's next? Lupin's gaze fell on Hermione. "I don't have long. The world is changing, tearing at its seams. And you, Hermione, are at the heart of it. You must come to Hogwarts. The castle knows. It remembers. And it waits." Hermione's mouth went dry. "What do you mean it waits?" But before Lupin could answer, the train jolted back to life. The lights flared, the engine roared, and when Hermione blinked, the compartment was empty. Lupin was gone. Harry lowered his wand, his voice trembling. "Tell me you all saw him." Ginny's eyes were wide. "We saw him." Ron swore under his breath. "This is mad." Hermione stared at the empty spot where Lupin had stood, her pulse hammering. His words echoed in her mind. The castle knows. It remembers. And it waits. Whatever Hogwarts had become, it was no longer just a school. It was part of the weaving, perhaps even the key to it all. And they were hurtling straight toward it. The train's whistle pierced the night as it rolled steadily toward Hogsmeade Station. Yet inside their compartment, the four friends sat in a tense silence, each one lost in their own storm of thoughts. Hermione's hands were clenched in her lap, her nails pressing against her skin. She could still hear Lupin's voice, low and urgent, echoing inside her skull. The castle knows. It remembers. And it waits. When the train finally screeched to a halt, the sound was almost a relief. The usual clamor of students gathering their trunks and pets filled the air, grounding them for a moment in something familiar. But Hermione knew better. Nothing about this journey was normal anymore. They stepped onto the platform, the cool night air brushing against their faces. Lanterns glowed faintly, illuminating the crowd of students moving toward the waiting carriages. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary. But then Hermione noticed the carriages themselves. They were no longer drawn by thestrals, nor were they empty as Muggle eyes might once have seen them. Instead, shapes flickered in and out of sight, as if the carriages themselves could not decide what they were. For a heartbeat Hermione thought she saw horses with wings, then shadows with eyes, then nothing at all. Ron muttered nervously, "I don't like this." "Not one bit." Hermione forced herself to breathe. "It's another sign. The boundaries aren't holding. Hogwarts is closer to the center than anywhere else. The castle must be pulling at the threads." Harry's eyes darkened, but he gave a determined nod. "Then let's go see what it wants." The four of them climbed into one of the carriages. The air inside felt heavy, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The ride up the slope was silent except for the crunch of gravel beneath wheels. The towering silhouette of Hogwarts rose above them, familiar yet wrong. At first glance, it was the castle they all knew, the turrets, the towers, the warm glow of windows. But as they drew closer, Hermione's sharp eyes caught the differences. A tower she had never seen before stretched into the clouds, its surface rippling faintly like water. A section of the wall appeared broken and rebuilt at once, shifting between ruin and perfection. "It's changing," Hermione whispered. "Even its own history is unstable." When they reached the gates, Hermione felt a prickle run across her skin. The wards that usually hummed faintly at the edge of her awareness now pulsed with power, alive and shifting, as if the castle itself was breathing. They stepped into the courtyard, their footsteps echoing. Students hurried around them, laughing, talking, but their voices seemed muted, like echoes from a distant memory. Hermione looked up, her chest tightening. The very stones of Hogwarts seemed to shimmer faintly. Professor McGonagall stood at the entrance, her stern face as steady as ever, yet her eyes lingered on Hermione in a way that made her throat go dry. McGonagall gave the usual speech to the first years, but Hermione barely heard it. The words felt thinner, as though they were trying to cover something much deeper stirring beneath the surface. When the students finally streamed into the Great Hall, Hermione froze. The enchanted ceiling glowed with stars as always, but now the constellations shifted faster than they should, racing across the sky. For a heartbeat she thought she saw not stars but fragments of memories. Her father's face at the breakfast table, Harry in the Chamber of Secrets, Ron laughing by the fire. Then the stars snapped back into place, twinkling as though nothing had happened. Hermione's chest tightened. Hogwarts wasn't just a school anymore. It was alive, reshaping itself to hold the woven world together. Lupin had been right, the castle remembered. She tore her eyes away from the ceiling, scanning the staff table. At first her heart lifted at the sight of familiar faces, McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, but then her blood ran cold. Sitting casually near the end of the table was someone who shouldn't be there. Severus Snape. He met her eyes, his expression unreadable. No sneer, no sharp glare, just a quiet acknowledgement, as if he knew exactly why she was staring. Hermione gripped the edge of the table, her pulse racing. Snape was dead. She had seen his final moments in the shrieking shack. And yet here he was, alive, teaching again as though nothing had changed. Ginny leaned closer, whispering, "Tell me you're seeing this too." Hermione nodded stiffly. "I see it." The great hall buzzed with chatter, oblivious. Only their small group seemed to realize that something was terribly wrong, or perhaps terribly right, depending on how one looked at it. Hermione's gaze flicked once more to Snape, then to McGonagall, then up to the restless ceiling. She felt the weight of Lupin's words pressing down on her. The castle was waiting. And now, it had begun to reveal what it remembered. The feast felt like a dream within a dream. Platters of food appeared as they always had, golden goblets filled with pumpkin juice, the hall alive with chatter. But Hermione barely touched her plate. Her gaze kept flicking toward the staff table, where Snape sat in quiet composure, eating as though his presence there were nothing out of the ordinary. Harry hardly looked away from him either, though his expression was sharp with suspicion. Ron kept muttering under his breath, stabbing at his food with his fork, while Ginny tried to keep her face neutral, though Hermione noticed her hands curled into fists. Hermione's mind spun furiously. It wasn't enough that Sirius and Lupin had appeared again. Snape being here suggested something deeper, something deliberate. The weaving wasn't pulling back random threads. It was reconstructing the entire fabric of history. When the meal finally ended and McGonagall dismissed the students to their dormitories, Hermione caught Harry's eye. He gave a quick nod. They both knew what had to be done. Instead of following the crowd, the four of them slipped away into the shadows of the corridor. The castle felt heavier tonight, the torches burning with an odd flicker, the stones humming faintly underfoot. Every breath Hermione took tasted of memory. They didn't have to search long. Snape was waiting in one of the side corridors, his black robes falling in perfect stillness around him. His dark eyes fixed on them the moment they turned the corner, as though he had been expecting them. "Granger," he said first, his voice smooth and quiet. He inclined his head slightly toward Harry and the others. "Potter." "Weasley." "Weasley." Ron scowled. "You're not supposed to be here. You're dead." Hermione shot him a warning glance, but Snape didn't react to the outburst. Instead, he regarded her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Miss Granger," he said softly, "you of all people understand the nature of boundaries. The boundaries between life and death, truth and illusion, memory and reality." Hermione stepped forward, her throat tight. "How are you here?" A flicker of something, almost amusement, crossed his face. "I might ask you the same. You are the axis on which this change turns. The weaving has begun to unspool the threads we thought were fixed. It seems even death is no longer absolute." Harry's voice broke the silence, sharp and demanding. "Did you know this would happen?" Snape's dark eyes lingered on him for a long moment. "I suspected something like it was possible. But knowing and witnessing are two different matters." When the prison fell and its choice was denied, the balance fractured. I imagine the castle called me back because it remembers me as part of its story. Hermione's stomach dropped. Lupin's words returned to her again. The castle knows. It remembers. Ginny's tone was colder than she intended. So what now? Do we just let everyone we've lost come walking back? Pretend nothing's wrong. Snape's eyes narrowed. There is nothing simple about this. Every return reshapes the whole. Memories change, histories shift. Soon you will find that even those who survived no longer remember the world as you once did. The castle is rewriting everything to reconcile your choice, Miss Granger. Hermione's mouth went dry. She thought of her parents, of how naturally they had spoken of her time at Hogwarts, as though the boundary had never existed. If the castle could rewrite that, what else could it alter? Ron finally snapped. This is mad. We're supposed to fight Voldemort again, is that it? He'll just come strolling back like nothing ever happened. Snape's expression did not flicker, but his silence was louder than any confirmation. Hermione's heart pounded. She stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. If the castle is rewriting the story, then we need to know how far it's willing to go. And we need to know what happens if it decides the war never ended. For the first time that night, a shadow of concern crossed Snape's features. Then you had best prepare yourselves. The castle is not merely a place anymore. It is memory given form. It remembers everything, every choice, every possibility. And it does not forget. The torch nearest them sputtered violently, the flame stretching higher before snapping back to normal. Hermione felt a chill crawl down her spine. Harry's jaw tightened. Then we don't wait. Tomorrow we start looking for answers in the castle. If Hogwarts is alive, then somewhere inside it must hold what we need to understand this. Snape inclined his head, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. At last, Potter speaks with sense. Then, as if the shadows themselves swallowed him, Snape turned and vanished down the corridor, leaving the four of them standing in uneasy silence. Hermione closed her eyes briefly, the words still echoing. The castle remembers everything. And she could not help but wonder, if the castle remembered Voldemort, was he already stirring within its walls? Morning came heavy and restless. Hermione barely slept, her dreams plagued by shifting corridors and voices whispering through the walls. She woke before dawn, the pale light of sunrise spilling across the dormitory. For a moment she simply lay still, listening. Even here, within Gryffindor Tower, she swore she could feel the castle breathing. By the time the others met her in the common room, she had already filled 3 pages of parchment with notes. Harry looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, and Ron's hair was sticking up in every direction as though he hadn't bothered with a comb. Ginny, though sharper than the rest, had the same taut unease in her shoulders. Hermione tucked the parchment into her bag. We need to start mapping it, she said briskly. The castle. The changes. If Hogwarts is remembering different versions of itself, we have to know where those versions bleed into each other. Ron groaned. You mean you want us to wander around looking for bits of nightmare? Yes, Hermione replied flatly. Exactly that. Harry gave her a faint smile despite the tension. She's right. Last night proved we can't ignore this. If the castle is rewriting itself, we need to see what it's writing. They left the tower together, the common room portrait swinging shut behind them. The corridors of Hogwarts had always been alive with their own kind of magic, but today the air was different, charged, humming like a string pulled too tight. At first the halls looked normal. Suits of armor stood in their usual places, tapestries swayed faintly in a draft. But as they rounded the corner toward the library, Hermione stopped so suddenly the others nearly collided with her. The corridor was wrong. Half of it stretched into the familiar long passage toward the library doors. But the other half, it rippled like water, its stones older, darker, carved with runes Hermione had never seen. A staircase twisted out of the wall where no staircase had ever been, leading upward into shadows. Ginny's voice was quiet. That wasn't here yesterday. Hermione's heart hammered. It's a memory, a version of the castle from some other time, or some other possibility. Ron paled. And we're supposed to walk into that. Yes, Hermione said firmly, though fear gripped her throat. If Hogwarts is showing us its memories, then somewhere in them lies the truth of what it wants. Harry had already stepped forward, his wand raised. We'll go together. They climbed the staircase, each step echoing as though the stones themselves recognized them. The air grew colder the higher they went, until Hermione could see her breath. At the top they emerged into a long hall that none of them had ever seen before. The walls were lined with portraits, but the faces within them were wrong. They weren't the familiar headmasters and witches she had studied in countless evenings of research. These portraits showed people she recognized from memory, but not as they should have been. In one frame, Dumbledore stood younger, his hair dark, his expression hardened. In another, she saw Harry himself, not as he was but older, scarred, his eyes haunted. A third frame held Ron, his features twisted into something cruel, a prefect's badge gleaming on his chest like a threat. Hermione felt the air press heavy on her chest. "These aren't portraits," she whispered. "They're possibilities. Versions of us that could have been." One of the portraits moved. The older Harry leaned forward, his voice carrying from the canvas like wind through stone. "You should not have done it, Hermione. The weaving cannot hold. It will consume you." Harry stiffened. "That's not me." The painted version's eyes burned. "Not yet." Ginny pulled her wand tighter in her grip. "I don't like this. These aren't just memories. They're warnings." The hall seemed to pulse, the portraits shifting, their figures leaning closer, their whispers growing louder until the sound became a chorus. "The castle knows. The castle remembers. The castle waits." Hermione's knees nearly buckled. She pressed her hand to the wall, steadying herself, her mind racing. Lupin, Snape, Sirius. Now the castle wasn't just showing them fragments of the past. It was testing them, forcing them to confront every possibility. Harry's voice cut through the cacophony. "We have to leave. Now." But as they turned, the staircase behind them was gone. Only stone sealed the way, trapping them in the hall of portraits that whispered with futures that were never meant to be. Hermione's heart pounded. For the first time since waking in her old bed, she realized this wasn't just about surviving the weaving. This was about proving themselves worthy of holding the threads together. And the castle had no intention of letting them go until they did. The whispers thickened, curling through the air like smoke. Each portrait leaned forward as though trying to step out of its frame. Hermione clutched her wand, her chest tight with dread, but she refused to look away. These weren't illusions. They were echoes of choices, shadows of what could have been. The older Harry spoke again, his voice hard and unyielding. "You think you can hold both worlds, Hermione. You think you can bind what was never meant to be bound. Do you know what happens when you refuse to choose?" The painted Ron barked a laugh, though there was no humor in it. His prefect's badge glinted darkly. "You unravel everything. You lose both." Hermione's breath came quick, but she forced herself forward. "You're not real. You're fragments. Reflections of paths that never happened." "Not real." The portrait of Ron sneered. "You look at me and see everything you fear he could have been. That is real enough." Ginny's grip on her wand tightened, her eyes narrowing at the painted Ron. "Don't listen to them. They're meant to break us." But the older Harry's gaze never wavered. "No, we are meant to warn you. The weaving tears at the heart of the castle. If it snaps, this place falls. And so do you." The whispers swelled again, dozens of voices chanting from the frames. "Choose. Choose. Choose." The walls pulsed. The floor shifted beneath their feet. Hermione felt the stone tremble, as though the castle itself were demanding an answer. Her heart hammered. If the weaving truly strained the castle, then every second she clung to both lives pushed them closer to collapse. But if she let go, if she surrendered one reality, it meant losing everything she had fought to protect. Harry stepped forward, facing his older self in the frame. His voice shook but did not falter. "We're not here to choose between worlds. We're here to survive in the one we've got. You're not me. You're a picture painted by fear." The portrait Harry tilted his head, sadness in his scarred face. "Perhaps. But fear can still be true." Hermione felt the pressure building, as though the hall itself was closing in. Her instincts screamed at her to act. If she let the whispers dictate her choice, she would lose control. She raised her wand, steadying her voice. "We don't choose fear. Not today." The air crackled. She drew on the strange pulse of the castle, the same rhythm she had felt when the weaving first bound itself inside her. The portraits shuddered as she spoke louder, her words defiant. This is not your hall. This is not your choice. The weaving does not tear, it binds. And I will not let you dictate the shape of it. Light burst from the tip of her wand, filling the corridor. The portraits recoiled, their figures twisting back into shadow. The whispers fractured into a roar, and then into silence. When the light faded, the hall was empty. The frames still lined the walls, but their canvases were blank, their warnings erased. The staircase had returned, winding down into shadow. Ron let out a shaky breath. Bloody hell, Hermione. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Ginny smirked faintly despite the tension. She already terrifies half the castle. Now it's the other half too. Hermione lowered her wand slowly, her arm trembling from the effort. She wanted to smile at their words, but her stomach was still in knots. The portraits had disappeared, but their message lingered. The weaving was tearing at the castle. If she failed to hold it steady, Hogwarts itself could collapse. And now she understood. Survival meant more than keeping both worlds alive. It meant proving to the castle that she could carry them without breaking. She swallowed hard and forced herself to lead the way down the staircase. One battle was won. But the true test had only just begun. The staircase curved down into darkness, each step echoing hollow and strange. None of them spoke at first, as if words might tempt the castle to twist again. Hermione's grip on the railing was so tight her knuckles whitened, but she forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly, reminding herself of the rhythm she had found in the weaving. When the stairs finally deposited them into a stone corridor, the air felt warmer, less charged with menace. They stepped cautiously into a wide, arched hall lit by torches. Hermione's eyes scanned every corner, half expecting more distorted portraits or vanishing doorways. But this place was different. In the center of the hall stood a circular table carved from dark wood, covered with objects, books, scrolls, quills, goblets, even what looked like children's toys. Around the table sat chairs, and in each one rested a faintly glowing figure. Hermione's breath caught. These weren't portraits. They weren't ghosts either. They shimmered like fragments of memory, half-transparent yet solid enough that their presence pressed against the air. Harry took a cautious step forward. Who are they? Hermione whispered, not who. What? Their impressions, shadows of the people who shaped the castle. One of the figures turned its head, and though its features blurred, Hermione felt an unmistakable weight in its gaze. Its voice, when it spoke, was layered, as though many voices spoke through one. The weaving strains the foundation. The castle remembers all who walked its halls, all who chose, all who lost. You stand where they once stood. You must decide as they did. Ron muttered, always with the choosing. But Hermione's mind raced. This wasn't another trap of fear like the portraits. This was different. The objects on the table weren't random. Each represented something, a memory, a choice, a legacy. The figure's many-layered voice continued. Pick one. Bind it. What you bind becomes part of you. What you reject fades. Hermione's pulse quickened. She glanced at Harry, Ginny, and Ron. Each of them seemed to understand instinctively. This was a test of allegiance, of identity. The weaving had demanded they carry both worlds. But now the castle was demanding proof that they could carry it without splintering. Harry's eyes fell on a battered toy broom lying among the objects. He reached for it slowly, his expression distant. When his hand closed over it, the figure at the table nodded. The broom flared once, then vanished, leaving behind a faint glow in Harry's chest. Ginny moved next. She reached without hesitation for a scroll tied with crimson ribbon. The moment she touched it, Hermione felt the air tighten, as though a fire had sparked. Ginny stood straighter, her eyes fierce. Ron hesitated, staring at the table. Finally, almost reluctantly, he picked up a simple wooden chess piece. It too flared and vanished, leaving him blinking but stronger somehow, more grounded. Hermione's hand hovered over the table. Dozens of objects called to her. A book bound in green leather, a quill still wet with ink, a goblet that shimmered with starlight. But one stood out above all. It was a mirror. Small, unadorned, the glass faintly clouded. When she leaned close, she did not see herself alone. She saw both lives woven together, her parents in their kitchen, her friends at the Gryffindor table, the world she had built out of impossibility. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. The mirror flared, brighter than all the others, and she felt it sink deep into her chest, not as a burden but as an anchor. The glowing figures around the table leaned back as one, their forms flickering. The many-layered voice rose once more. You have chosen. But the weaving does not test choice alone. It tests endurance. It tests unity. It tests truth. The torches guttered, plunging the hall into shadow. When the light returned, the table and the figures were gone. Only the four of them remained, standing in the silent hall. Hermione pressed a hand against her chest where the mirror had entered. It still pulsed faintly, warm against her heartbeat. She felt stronger, steadier, but also more aware of the weight she carried. Harry broke the silence. That wasn't the end. No, Hermione whispered. It was only the beginning. The castle wants to see if we can keep carrying what we've chosen. If we falter. She glanced at the stone walls around them, feeling the hum of the weaving within the castle itself. It will take everything. The four of them stood in the hall for a long moment, their breathing the only sound. The air no longer thrummed with immediate threat, but Hermione could feel the weight of what had just happened pressing down on all of them. The table was gone, the glowing figures dispersed, yet the choices they had made lingered like invisible marks carved into their chests. Ron broke the silence first, shifting awkwardly. So, we're just going to pretend that wasn't completely mad? That we picked up a bunch of glowing junk and shoved it into ourselves? Ginny gave him a sharp look. It wasn't junk. It meant something. Didn't you feel it? Ron frowned, rubbing the spot over his heart. I felt something. Like it wasn't just a chess piece. More like it was reminding me of who I am. But what if I chose wrong? Hermione shook her head. There wasn't a wrong choice, Ron. Only the choice that was yours. The castle wanted to see what anchored us, what we would claim as ours. That's why Harry picked the broom. That's why you picked chess. And Ginny. Ginny cut her off, her voice firm. The scroll. It felt like fire in my hands. Like I was binding myself to a promise. Her eyes glowed with determination. I know what it meant. It was my will. My fight. That's what I've always carried. Harry nodded slowly, his fingers brushing where the broom had vanished into him. And mine was freedom. Flying has always been that for me. No matter how dark things got, flying was escape. He looked at Hermione. What about you? Hermione hesitated, her hand pressing against her chest where the mirror pulsed faintly. I chose the mirror, because it showed me both lives together, not apart. It reminded me why I'm here, why I can't let one world slip away for the other. The weaving may test us, but I won't abandon either side of myself. Ron muttered. Trust you to pick something terrifyingly symbolic. Hermione almost smiled, but the heaviness in the air stole the curve of it. She knew this wasn't just about symbols. The mirror burned in her chest with quiet intensity, a reminder that every step from here onward would test her claim. The silence thickened again, until Harry finally spoke. So what's next? Do we wait for the castle to throw another trial at us, or do we move before it decides for us? Hermione considered. The castle was alive with the weaving now, its stones shifting between memory and possibility. Waiting would mean surrendering to whatever form the next test took. Moving might let them steer, however slightly. We keep moving, she said firmly. If Hogwarts is testing us, then it's because it wants proof that we can hold the weaving. Hiding won't give it that. We'll keep pushing forward. Ginny adjusted her wand belt. Then we head down. If the castle's pulling us deeper, there has to be a heart to it all. Something at the core where this weaving started. Hermione nodded, but her stomach churned. She had felt that pull too, an almost gravitational tug toward something far beneath them. The source of the weaving was there, perhaps even the reason she had woken in her old life months ago. But if they reached it unprepared, they might not come back. The torches flickered overhead, as if mocking her hesitation. The castle wasn't going to let them pause for long. Down it is, Harry said, steadying his grip on his wand. As they pressed forward, the hall narrowed into a descending passage. The air grew colder again, and the stone beneath their feet changed. No longer the familiar castle floor, but something rougher, older, as though they were walking deeper into time itself. Hermione's pulse raced. The mirror inside her flared faintly, reacting to the change. She knew they were approaching something more dangerous than illusions or portraits. The next trial wouldn't just test their choices. It would test their ability to stand together without fracturing. And if they failed, the castle would not simply close a door or erase a hall. It would consume them whole. The descent ended in silence. Hermione stepped into the vast chamber with Harry, Ron, and Ginny at her side, but she barely noticed the echoes of their footsteps. All her attention locked onto the center of the room, where light and shadow twisted in a storm of threads. It wasn't a mere knot of magic. It was alive. Faces flickered in the weaving, her parents laughing in their kitchen, Harry's determined eyes at the Battle of Hogwarts, Ron's hand steadying hers during exams, Ginny's fiery smile before a Quidditch match. Memories of two lives, two truths, colliding in endless repetition. The storm pulsed like a heartbeat, and with every pulse the stones trembled. A voice rose from the chaos, not spoken but felt deep within her chest. Choose. Choose or be unmade. Hermione's knees nearly buckled. This was the demand that had haunted her since the morning she woke in her parents' home. To accept one life and deny the other. To decide what was dream and what was real. But she straightened her back. Her wand shook in her grip, but her voice was steady. No, I will not choose. Both are mine. Both are real. The weaving surged violently, threads lashing outward like whips. Harry raised his wand beside her, his jaw set. You're not alone, Hermione. Ron moved forward too, fear in his eyes but determination stronger. We've come this far together. We're not leaving you to this. Ginny lifted her wand, fierce as fire. If the castle wants a fight, then it gets all of us. The threads struck, but instead of splintering, their magic met it head-on. Hermione's mirror flared inside her chest, catching the storm and twisting it into patterns. She guided the flow, and her friends lent their strength, weaving their lights with hers. The storm resisted, tried to tear itself apart, but she would not let it. She pulled the threads tighter, not separating the worlds, not forcing one to win, but binding them together. Her parents' kitchen merged with the warmth of the Gryffindor fire. Childhood laughter blended with the roar of Quidditch crowds. Love, loss, battle, and peace, all woven into one fabric. The chamber shook so violently it felt as though the castle itself might collapse. Then, with a final pulse, the storm of threads collapsed inward. The weaving shrank until it was no bigger than a single glowing thread, which drifted gently into Hermione's open hand. Silence fell. The tremors ceased. The storm was gone. Hermione stared at the thread glowing in her palm. It was small now, manageable, but its weight was infinite. She felt it sink into her chest, merging with the mirror already there. And then she understood. It had never been about choosing. It had been about carrying. About proving she could live with the burden of memory, of possibility, of two worlds bound together. Harry's hand rested on her shoulder. His voice was soft but sure. It's over. Hermione looked at him, then at Ron and Ginny. Their faces were tired but proud, and for the first time she felt the storm inside her quiet. She smiled faintly, tears blurring her vision. No, it's not over. It's only beginning. But I know I can bear it now. The chamber faded. The stones dissolved into light, and in an instant they were back in the common room. Firelight flickered. Books lay open on the tables. Laughter from the halls drifted faintly in. Yet when Hermione glanced at the window, she saw not only the castle grounds, but also her parents' garden, roses blooming in the sun. Both lives. Both homes. Together at last. She sank into an armchair, exhaustion flooding her, but peace at last settled in her heart. She would no longer wake in terror, wondering which world was real. Because the truth was simple. They both were. And she, Hermione Granger, dreamer, daughter, which would carry them. Always.